Is that better?
Now I can hear you. Perfect, perfect. Look at that. Practical libertarian solving practical problems. Huh?
That's what it was. Easy day. Easy day.
Easy day. I'm happy to have you on. I have a lot of questions for you, Larry, now that you're running for office again. But I also want to clarify for everybody at home that, you know, we talk about a lot of people we disagree with on this channel, but I do genuinely believe Larry is a genuine person. I think Larry's a good guy, and I believe he believes everything he believes. And so even if we have political disagreements today, Larry Sharp would be one of the people I'd point to and be one of the people I'd say, I disagree with this guy. I'd probably still have a beer with him at the end of the day, right? And
I appreciate that tremendously. I really do.
But that doesn't mean I'm going to hold back on any of the tough questions for you today.
No, go ahead. I think if you've seen what I do, I go out of my way more than I think any other libertarian that I could think of to reach out to the left. To the best of my ability. I want to have conversations because I believe in my heart that we do want to go to the same place. I think we disagree on how to get there. That's my thought.
Okay, so do you want me to start with the issue that I know all my audience asked me about before this, my number one question?
Whatever you like.
Then,
100%, whatever.
Once we're over this and over libertarianism as a whole, we can get to your policy platform. I want to make sure we have a decent chunk so you can make your pitch. But I do want to start with this because this was the number one asked question, and it has to do with the chapter of the Libertarian Party that has gotten a lot of attention. That's the New Hampshire chapter. And what was an endorsement from the National Libertarian Party of a message they tweeted out about 2 days ago that had to do with President Zelensky, who had a drawn-on Hitler mustache. Zelensky being, of course, the first Jewish president of Ukraine, family died in the Holocaust, and basically called him like a dollar store Hitler.
Be a weird Nazi, wouldn't it? That'd be a weird Nazi.
It would be an extremely weird Nazi. And so my question for you is, I was always given the impression that the New Hampshire branch is just like a crazy, crazy branch. But ever since
generally true.
But ever since this recent, like I would say, the Mises caucus has taken over the party, many have made the argument, and I am sympathetic to this argument, that the that type of craziness has taken over much more of the Libertarian Party because, you know, the National Libertarian Party endorsed this message. And so I wanted to ask you about this, like what you thought of that, considering that you're a long-standing libertarian.
No, it's a valid question. No, I'm not upset at all. It's a valid question. There are several pieces I'll bring up. The first piece is, this is in response to literally years of us failing and being ignored. And, you know, as someone would say things like, you know, people do crimes because they're desperate, which is a common thing that you do find. People act out when they're desperate too. And I feel like a lot of people in the Liberty Movement and Liberty Party have felt they've been ignored, we've been failing for 50 years. And we believe in our hearts that we're right and that we're correct, and we see the country keep going poorly. So I think you find a chunk of us who are actually going, you know what, let's do whatever it takes to get people talking about us. And to be forward, you're talking about us. So as far as the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire is going, they're winning right now, right? Because you're talking about us. So they're actually winning. And I know people say, well, it's terrible, Larry. It makes us look bad. Most people think we look bad already. Most people think we're terrible already. Most people already think that. So I get why they're doing it. Clearly, it's not my messaging. That's the kind of thing that I would do. I mean, you know me well enough that I never do any of that stuff. It's not the kind of thing that I do. I think my method is a better method, which is more reaching out and not being as bombastic. But I understand when I do it. I get it. Do I support it? Of course not. Why would I support something like that? I would ask anyone who is looking at that and looking at me particularly to judge me by what I've done and what I've said and who I am versus what people who are trying to get the message out, right? If I would hope you wouldn't judge every Democrat by the worst Democrats, you wouldn't judge every socialist by the worst socialists. I hope you wouldn't judge every Republican by the worst Republicans. That's what I would say.
I would not judge every Republican for what, say, Marjorie Taylor Greene says, or every Democrat for whatever, I guess, would be the left-wing equivalent of Marjorie Taylor Greene in anybody's head. But I guess, like, when you say it's like a chunk of the party, like, this message was endorsed by the National Libertarian Party. Sure. When you say it's like a chunk, it's hard for me to think it's just a chunk when the National Libertarian Party, headed by Angela, put this message out and said, yes, we agree with this message. They publicly said it, and they reaffirmed it. So how is that just like a chunk of the party?
It's still a larger chunk then. Yes, the part that took over, right? The party, when it comes to, if you look at particularly smaller parties, and it's a very important piece to understand. The party is run by those who show up, right? That's how it works. Particularly when you have a smaller party. The Mises Caucus, whether you like them or don't like them, they showed up. And when they show up, you win. That's how it works, particularly in smaller parties. Those who show up win. They won. They now control. And what's the old saying? Elections have consequences? They sure do. And this is the consequence that we have. They won. That's how it is. So, yes. And they will either do well and the party will grow, in which case we'll have more of this messaging and then we'll keep going because it's working. Or the party will not grow, it won't do well, in which case the party will change and someone else will take over in a couple of years. I wish I had a better answer for you. I'm giving you an honest answer. I actually left the LNC in 2017 when our vice chair actually said that all veterans were murderers and should be punished as such. And that was 5 years ago. So that kind of stuff happens all the time. And I left the LNC. I didn't leave the party because the party, no matter how bad people may think the party may be at any given time, and it's better and worse depending upon where you are in the country and who's at the top, for sure, it's still the only vehicle for real change politically right now in our country. It's the third largest party, hands down, not even close. It has the most infrastructure compared to any other group. We're the only people who've had 50-state ballot access for the past 5 years. No other party's been able to do that, except the major two, obviously. We're the only ones who, have been able to do any of that stuff. So I'm with you. It's a problem. It is what it is. I wish I had a better answer for you.
I guess my question to you would be, if you're a voter in this country, you look at a ballot, you see Democrat, you see Republican. Most people know what those are, and they usually vote with them.
Sure.
And then you look on the ballot and you see the Libertarian option. Now, let's say you're a Ukrainian American or you're a Jewish American who saw this message and you're thinking to yourself, and they see your name and they might have even heard what you had to say and they think but do I really want the party to benefit from this? The party that tweeted that out? Because if let's say you became governor, that would be a national story. I mean, that would be massive breakthrough for the Libertarian Party. It would be the biggest, the highest office holder for the Libertarian Party as Justin Amash, and he won as a Republican, not as a Libertarian. So this would be even bigger than Justice Amash.
100%.
So if they would, in their mind, why would they want to kind of reward the party who put out this message with political victories?
It's a valid point. I'm not really sure where you're going to go with this. It's a valid point. You're right. If people looked at the Libertarian Party and didn't know what they were, and they saw this, and they were either Jewish or Ukrainian, clearly they wouldn't want to support that. Of course they wouldn't. Should I then drop out of the race now or become a Democrat or something? No, it's still my party.
I would say you should become a Democrat. That's my opinion.
You would say that, yes, but how Democrats don't like me at all. They don't want me. They don't listen to me. I have tried to make coalition with the DSA. They don't want to coalesce. They've been very polite to me. The DSA has been very polite to me. I've been to many of their events. They're very good to me, but they do not want me to speak. They do not want me around. So even though I have absolutely been there, I've opened up with the Green Party. I've tried. I literally told this is the truth. I tried very hard to get the Green Party to not try to petition this year and instead to put someone on my ticket so we can have a coalition ticket. So absolutely, I'm on board, man. I would love for it to work. The problem is the two-party system right now is so broken. I just don't see another answer. And will that hurt me? Yes, it will. And it doesn't change who I am. My hope is enough people don't get annoyed or enough people believe in me. There isn't really much else that I can say. It's not a good thing, but what am I going to do?
So I would just want to ask you straight up, do you think this type of messaging helps or hurts the party in the long term? And would you advise them to keep going with this type of messaging or stop it?
Be forward, and this may make some of your audience unhappy, but I'm going to be very forward with you. I'm not going to lie to you as I never have. I don't know. The reality of it is bombastic, nasty things have helped people like Trump get ahead. It's helped some people get ahead. Will it help us? I don't know, right? For me, short term, no, this is killing me short term. The civil war in the Libertarian Party is destroying me. It's hurt me in many ways. It's hurt my fundraising. It's hurt my volunteers. It has hurt me tremendously. So short term, it's not helping at all. Long term, I don't know. Will it draw enough people into the party? Will it make us more valid, right? The example I'll give you is when polling comes out, right? When you're a third party and you get your butt kicked in a poll, like you get 2, 3, 4, 5%, something like that, you might go, Larry, it looks terrible. It does, but it also makes me legitimate. So in the long run, getting my butt kicked in a poll helps me in the long run to be more legitimate. Will this? I don't know. Right? Will this make us more legitimate? Will more people see us as a real party? I think we'll know in a year or two.
I mean, I understand like the idea that you need to find a way to get attention, definitely when nobody's paying attention
Correct.
to the libertarians. But like, if somebody was to ask me, right, if I wanted to get a third party like a lot of attention, my answer to that was, well, let's have one of my candidates imitate I don't know, Indian people while talking about Narendra Modi, right, and doing like some caricature that's really offensive towards Indian people. I would be like, that's a terrible idea. That's not going to make our party look good. That's going to leave a bad taste in the mouth of many Indian Americans. And so if somebody was to say this to me, it's very easy for me to say, that's bad, you shouldn't do it. So I don't understand how it's like, I don't know, when we're talking about a Jewish person whose family was killed in the Holocaust being caricatured as Hitler as his country is invaded, and we see all these war crimes coming out.
You asked me two separate questions.
You can answer
two separate
both.
questions.
Take as much time as you need.
So I want to be clear on both sides. Do I think it's a good idea? Would I do it? No. But you also asked, will it help in the long run? Those are two separate questions. Sometimes absolute horrible stuff does in the long run help. That's why I said, I don't know if it will help us in the long run. That was my answer. My answer was not, I don't know, to is it good or bad for me? Would I do it? No, it's not helping me at all. It's a bad thing. I would never support it. I don't support it. I didn't say anything to it. However, will it help us in the long run? What we've been doing for 50 years has been failing. That's for sure. Will this be the thing that gets us known? I don't know. We'll find out. I don't really know. That's what I'm saying. I hope that was clearer in my answer.
Yeah, you're saying you don't want to personally do it, but you don't know if this would be successful or not. So my question to you, do you think there's a possibility that this is a successful strategy for the Libertarian Party?
It's a good question, and as I'm being full with you, what we've been doing for the past 50 years has not been working. We're not doing what we should be doing. And does being bombastic in today's world work? Sometimes it does, right? I mean, think about the people who become popular literally doing porn tapes, right? And they become superstars by doing porn tapes, which if you would ask someone 20 years ago, is it a good idea to do a porn tape? Like, no, don't, that's a terrible idea. And yet they become superstars over it. So if you want me, I could virtue signal and do that, but that's not who I am.
Okay.
I'm telling you the reality. I don't know if it's going to help us at all. Now, this specific one probably won't. However, if they're going to be bombastic, the bombastic types, those things may, I don't know, we'll find out. And if we lose in the long run, then we'll be in the same spot we're in now. Not being paid attention to, not winning elections, getting our butt kicked, not getting, just watching the country fall into a left-right paradigm to where we're falling in the verge of not even talking to each other anymore. We date by left and right. We have friends based upon left and right. We don't communicate. I'm one of the rare people, as you know, who will talk to, an alt-righter and talk to a socialist. And I'll have a conversation with both. There aren't enough of guys like me out there.
Okay. This will be the last question of this strip before I move on to the next part of this question.
I don't mind. Do whatever makes your audience happy. I want to make your audience happy. I'm sorry, not audience. How about that? They may not be happy, but I do want to satisfy them.
Okay. So if the idea is that it might be possible for something like this to work, like would you like advocate for just like more radical posts of like, hey, abolition of the state, or there's always the meme about like age of consent or anything that could like get attention? Like, do you think that could be a winning strategy? Because that seems what
we've tried the age of consent stuff, which I'm against that also. I'm against. That's not my style. I think it's all about it. I think we have to go more. I think I have to get you to believe there are enough people like me in the movement to want to talk to me. That's what I think. That's what I do. If you notice, coming out of my campaign, you never see stuff come out of my campaign. You never see stuff come out of people who are in my world. That's not what I do. However, maybe I'm wrong. It's possible I'm wrong, right? Maybe I am wrong.
Justin Amash was kind of like sings the same tune on this when he talks about the caucus, which I do want to move the second question over to the caucus. The Mises Caucus has gotten a lot of attention after it's kind of taken over the party with Angela at the helm of that, getting about 69% of the vote. And that seems to be a lot where this divide is coming, that the idea that they're taking the party in kind of a more hard right direction. One of the most obvious examples of this that a lot of people were angry about was not only like the alterations when it came to the issue of abortion on the Libertarian Party website, but a big one was, and this one felt kind of just weird from my point. It felt like a pointless like thing. It was like the removal of the condemning of bigotry. They removed condemning bigotry and racism as bad from the Libertarian Party website. And when Angela, the chairman of the party, was asked about this, she said, "But what's bigotry?" And then when asked, "So do you think there's a, position for bigots in the party?" "Yes, because we believe in free speech." Do you think bigots have a place in the Republican Party? I mean, the Libertarian Party?
Well, Republican Party, I think yes. To answer your first question, but it's a good question. Again, I don't want to pander. I want to give you an honest answer. No, in the long run, but sometimes short run. And what I mean by that, when people are upset with whatever the top ruler in class is saying or doing, and they feel oppressed, they very often come to us. My example is, if you look at most blue states, like New York as an example, it's a very blue state. The Libertarian Party tends to lean right because it's run by Democrats. You go to a state like, say, Oklahoma, very much run by Republicans. Libertarian Party leans left when it comes to that. So Libertarian Party leans the opposite of the state, usually because they're against the establishment's general rule. So that means it also shifts, not in every state, but in certain states, particularly in the country, it does. You find that when Trump was in charge, the Libertarian Party leaned more left. When with Biden in charge, it leans more right. It tends to lean the opposite of whoever's in charge. That's a tendency. It's not a 100% rule, but it's a good 80% rule when it comes to the party. So if the people who are in charge are fighting against bigots, yeah, the bigots will come to us temporarily. Now, that sucks. I agree. That sucks. However, it's not a safe home as a general rule for bigots in our party. So they'll come temporarily. They'll realize this is not a place for them, and most of them will leave. But some will stay, and those who stay are generally the people who really weren't bigots. They were just swept up in the movement that they felt was the right movement for them, and they realized it wasn't. And I think it's happened many times in the party where people have moved in and then gone away, and then moved in and then gone away. Most of those people didn't go directly to the Libertarian Party. They came from the other party. They came from the Republican Party, and then Republicans lost. So they came to us thinking, well, we can turn the Libertarian Party into the party we want. And then they can't, and then they leave. Or they come from Democrats, same thing. But people come from the right to our party faster, but they also leave faster. They come to our party from the left slower, but they also leave slower. So most people who come from the left tend to stay. That makes any sense. Did I answer your question?
Yeah,
I hope I answered it.
I think you did. Just a clarifying question. So you would say that with the recent changes to the platform when it comes to not condemning bigotry anymore under Angela Mercado's leadership, you would say that in the short term that it's possible this could make it more comforting to bigots and maybe making them want to join more, but that,
yes, I think that's possibly true.
But that, like, do you have a problem with that? I guess is my question. Do you have a problem?
I do, and I would never have agreed to doing that. I think it's a terrible idea, and it is my gut, and I don't have a fact, but I'll make the call now. Within 4 years, we will put it back.
Okay.
That's what I think will happen. I think within 4 years, we'll put it back. That's what I think.
Do you think libertarians learned the wrong message from 2016 with Gary Johnson's? I mean, he got more votes than any libertarian ever, right? You got to give him credit for that. But
I love Gary Johnson. He's the reason why I'm in the party. I tried to be his VP. I ran to be his VP. I wanted to be a Johnson Sharp ticket. I lost by 31 votes. I love Gary Johnson.
Do you think libertarians got the wrong message from that and have turned to a different direction that they should have when it comes to the party?
No, I think there are two things that hurt us and made this turn more than anything. One was Bill Weld leaving us and going back to the Republican Party. A lot of libertarians felt betrayed and thought, you know what, he supported Hillary Clinton at the end. He vouched for Hillary Clinton at the end of the campaign, which made a lot of libertarians think, see this, all these lefties coming in. And then the Joe Jorgensen campaign in 2020 was not a good campaign compared to Gary Johnson. We wanted more than Gary Johnson. And when Joe Jorgensen didn't do as well, I think that loss is what really turned the party. That's what I think. I think the 2020 loss, I think really made people think, what are we doing here? I think that was the kind of the straw that broke the camel's back.
Okay. So we've used this term Mises Caucus a few times now. I think a lot of people in my audience don't know what the Mises Caucus is. Could you give like a brief explainer to what the Mises Caucus is?
Sure. As a general rule, it is a caucus filled with people who want to move the party more towards a more purist style. What they believe is a more purist message, a more hardcore straight message. They believe that if you are bolder in your messaging, you will move more people towards you. Their mindset as a general rule is we're not focusing on getting Democrats and Republicans to join the party. We're trying to focus on people who are already libertarian, who haven't stepped up. And they want to build out a base of people who already believe in the tenets and draw them in. And they pick someone a bit more purer, like a Ludwig von Mises. That's the reason and what they're trying to achieve.
So, my question to you would be: is it true that you were on the advisory board for the caucus?
I am.
So,
absolutely,
the person who the caucus elected, Angela, is the person that also gave a thumbs up to the removing of the bigotry notion on the Libertarian Party website. She's assumedly that this retweet of Zelensky with the Hitler mustache wouldn't have gone through, or they wouldn't have doubled down on it without her probably at least tacit approval, or at least letting it pass.
Yeah, to be fair, the odds are she didn't see the initial piece. That's the odds are. However, you're right. If she's going to double down, she doubled down. That's up to her. But to be fair to her, she probably doesn't see everything that goes on social media before it goes out.
Of course,
just to be fair.
But I guess for me, it's the double down. It wasn't the like, hey, our party chapters have disagreements. It was they endorsed it. And so my question to you would be, do you think she's a good person to lead the party?
He's clearly not listening to me in this regard. So you can see how strong my power is on the advisory board. But yes, she's the person we elected, right? That's it, by 60 some odd %. That's the person we have, and that's who it is. Do I believe that Angela's doing what she thinks is right? 100% yes. I do believe that she thinks this is exactly the right answer, and she's trying to move it forward the right way. I believe that 100%. I do not think she is a bad faith actor in any way, shape, or form. I think she believes this is the right move. This will grow the party the way she believes it will grow. I think she believes it will grab the people who are hardcore libertarians throughout the country, and they will flock towards our party. I think she believes that 100%. Yes, I do believe that.
Politely, that's not what I asked, though. I asked, do you think she's the right person to lead the party? Considering
I'm sorry. I misunderstood your question. I apologize. I misunderstood your question. I'm sorry. So you're saying, do I think she's the right person? That's a good question. The issue is who else was there, right? So am I picking are you asking me to pick my perfect chair? Or are you asking me to pick out of the people who were there? That's the issue. The reality is most people didn't step up to do this.
I guess my question is, let's say that you had an opportunity to change the leadership right now into, I guess, really anyone else, right? Do you think that she is like the optimal choice, or really even a good choice to lead the party?
Well, the optimal choice, no. There are definitely people who would be better off, better at doing it, more experienced, better at communicating, of course. But I don't have that, right? I mean, I don't mean to be flippant, but I have the group of people who are prepared to do this job, which, by the way, the DNC, RNC is all paid positions. This is a volunteer position that you have to go through a lot of work and time and energy and herd cats and get yelled at and be hammered to do this job. So I wouldn't do it. Right? I wouldn't do it. There's no way I would do this job. It's a hard job to do. So with who we have, yes. And I know that may make your audience unhappy, but I'm being very focused. Yes. I don't think we'd find somebody who'll be as dedicated, who'd want to get things done, who would try to make the trains run on time, who would try to move all the parts to get 50 state ballot access. The other guy we had before literally just quit. He just literally quit. He walked away. Which is what people do when they can't do it. So of the people who are running, and the people who are even interested, of libertarians, I mean, if I could pick like a magical person, I'd love someone like Justin Amash to be our chair.
Okay.
That'd be great. If that could happen, I would love that. But he's not going to do this job either. I mean, that's the problem. You're asking for this unicorn. The person doesn't exist.
I mean,
but if I could have someone like Justin Amash be my chair, yeah, I would love that. I mean, he knows how to run things. Yeah. So if you have it in, Dylan, you can get Justin to run next time.
What do you think it says about the party though, when what you're saying is like the best option available is somebody who would at least support this Hitler Zelensky tweet, or think we should that the bigotry edition, the condemnation of bigotry, need to be removed from the party website as one of your official positions. Like, what does that say about the Libertarian Party right now?
It says what I said before, and I'll stand by it. Without it, we lose for sure. With it, we might still lose, but we might win. If more people are talking about us and more people are moving forward, more people are going to, donate more money, join the party, start moving forward in other ways, it might be the right answer. And I'm not saying it is. I wouldn't do it. Clearly, I've said that more than once. But I understand why they would. The issue is, and I'll go to Nazis in general. I'll be very clear, Nazis in general. If people are starting to support Nazis in general, whether it's my party or any other party, they're moving towards Nazis, how bad is your world to where people are openly supporting Nazis? Right? I mean, so since we talk about Nazis, let's look at Nazi Germany. How bad was the world if Germans wanted to run towards Nazis, right? So no matter when people start voluntarily making what you and I would consider bad choices, something's going on. People shouldn't naturally do that, right? That shouldn't be a thing. So as I'll go back to what I said before, desperate people do desperate things, right? Am I mad at the guy who, to the old saying, who steals a piece of bread to feed his family? Yeah, I don't want him stealing, but I understand why he did. He's got to feed his family. So I understand both sides of that. I don't like him stealing. Stealing is bad. He shouldn't steal. And he has to feed his family. So I'm not saying we're feeding our family, but when you have 50 years of failure and now we have a more desperate style, I get it. That's all I'm saying. I get it. So if you want me to be upset about this, I am, but I'm also running my own campaign. But maybe they're going to be right. And whether this meme does well or doesn't do well, if it grows the campaign and I have a better chance of moving forward, let it be. We'll move on and we'll fix it later.
Okay.
Otherwise, we do nothing and we collapse as always.
Last question about the Mises question. I keep saying last question, but I just...
You keep saying that, but it's fine.
I keep saying that.
Brother, it's all good. I'm happy you're talking to me, Dylan. I can't tell you how happy I am. So do your thing. All good.
I'm happy to talk to you. Do you think the Mises Party, the Mises caucus, should dominate the Libertarian Party? Do you think it's a good thing that they've grabbed the reins, considering some of the decisions they've made?
And this will make your audience unhappy, but I'm be very forward. In the long run, it's a great idea. In the long run, it is. In the short run, it's hurt me. It has hurt me personally in the short run. In the long run, it's a great idea. And here's the reason why. Either they will do as they say and they will grow the party and things will be great and their tactics are correct, in which case we will grow and and things will be great, or they will not and they will fail, in which case we will learn from this and won't do this again. This is part of the growing pains we have to go through. This should be a wake-up call for all the libertarians who... The Mises Caucus is a symptom, much like many bad things that happen in our world are. It's a symptom. We were not successful. We failed. And here's the worst part. If the party itself was strong enough, it should have resisted, and it shouldn't have been taken over. But it didn't. It wasn't strong enough, and it couldn't resist it. It should be stronger if it doesn't like this takeover. This is an absolute good thing for the party in the long run. There is no doubt. And I know half of your people, probably their heads exploded. But without question, in the long run, it is a good thing because either it's right or it's wrong, and we get through this horrible time, and we fix our party, which needs to be fixed desperately. But short run, it's beat me up terribly short run. I've lost donors. I've lost volunteers. I have lost a lot.
You've lost donors and volunteers because of the caucus takeover.
100%. Yes, it has hurt me in the short run. It has.
Why do they tell you
Absolutely.
that they're dropping support?
Because they want me to openly go to war against the Mises Caucus, which I will not. I will not. Absolutely not. The Mises Caucus is in charge of the party. I need the party. I'm in the party. When I had people above me before that I couldn't stand, I didn't go to war with them either. When I had guys saying things I didn't want them saying, I didn't go to war with them either. I don't go to war with anybody in my own party. I don't go to war with them. Not what I do.
Not what you do. Do you think there's any war worth fighting in the Libertarian Party?
Maybe, not this one. If I thought it was maybe long-term pain, maybe. I don't see it as long-term pain. The party moves and shifts all the time. I think that, as I said, I think within 2 to 4 years, we're going to re-put that stuff back in the platform. That's my gut.
Not even like a moral fight. Like, this is morally wrong. It must be condemned. It must be stopped.
Maybe, but then what value does it have? So I virtue signal and make people upset, and then nothing changes? I played that game before.
Okay.
That game before.
Let me use that as a connection to the next question, and that is being a libertarian. So a lot of people, I would say, actually, basically all of my viewers are not libertarians. And you are a libertarian. You're Larry Sharpe running for governor of New York. You're asking for people to vote for you, voting for a party that most people would know doesn't have a decent chance of winning. And a lot of people consider the Libertarian Party fringe, maybe pretty extreme, pretty like a crazy party. I would say a lot of things I just brought up is many of the reasons why people say they want to vote for libertarians. So why should, considering the actions of the party as a whole right now, when it's taken over by the Mises Caucus, these types of posts, these types of messages, why should people vote libertarian?
There are two things. One, the vast majority of New Yorkers have no idea what the Mises Caucus is. Don't even know what you're talking about. Don't know the meme. Have no idea. I know. I campaign every single week. I am out meeting people all the time. Almost no one brings this up. And I mean almost no one. The vast majority of New Yorkers don't know what the Mises Caucus is, don't care about it, don't even know anything. In fact, most of them, the only thing they know about libertarians is me. That's what most New Yorkers think. We're just not that popular. Dylan, you're a political junkie. So you know this stuff because you're a political junkie. The average New Yorker has no idea. In fact, most people don't want to vote for me, not because of me at all. They have some of them actually like me and don't want to vote for me. Some of them think I'm great and don't want to vote for me. Their worry is the other guy will win. That's all the New Yorkers care about as a general rule. They go, I can't vote for you, Larry, because if they're a Democrat, the Republican will win. If they're a Republican, Democrat will win. This has virtually no bearing on my campaign when it comes to voters. The people where I have trouble is the internal libertarians who would be my volunteers and my donors. That's where it affects me. But voters, hardly at all.
So, I mean, if you're a political junkie or you just watch this conversation me and you had, let's say somebody Googled your name and this is what pops up, then maybe they would maybe now have these questions. And so I would say, like, most people don't know about the caucuses in the Democratic Party, Republican Party.
Sure.
If I ask the average voter, tell me what caucuses there are on the Democratic Party, most people won't even know what a caucus is. And so I would say that it still has a lot of influence, though, and it has a lot of influence over the party. So what would be your would you tell these people, well, it'll change with time, like later
what I would tell them is, why do you care? It's not going to affect you in New York State whatsoever. It means nothing. It is completely irrelevant whether the Mises Caucus takes over the LP, whether the LP as a national group goes away tomorrow, or whether it becomes whatever. It is irrelevant to New York. That's what I would tell them. That's what I do tell the few people who bring it up. I go, why do you care? I'm the guy here who has the answers to your problems. I'm the guy here who's traveling across the state. I'm the guy here who actually doesn't want to just steal your money. I actually want to do something with it that makes sense. I'm the guy who actually wants to make things right in your state. That's what I say. And the 99.9% of people go, you know what, you're right.
So
once in a while you have someone who's a diehard, but it's very rare.
So you're saying that the Mises Caucus will have zero influence over how you govern the state of New York if you were to win?
Yeah, why? Well, okay. Can I win? Yes, but I think the odds of my victory are not high, right? There is a path to be forward. There is a path. The path is the same path of Jesse Ventura, which is if I'm able to, but if we want to talk about it later, I have a lawsuit that I'm dealing with on Friday. If I win my lawsuit, I will officially be on the ballot. If I'm on the ballot, I will be in the debates. If I do very well in debates, then I have a chance of getting 35%, which in a three-way race is a win. That's the Jesse Ventura model. So could that happen? Yes, it is possible that I win. And obviously, I hope that I win. And if I win, why would anyone care about the Mises Caucus? I don't know why they would.
Well, no, I'm asking, would they have influence over how you govern in any capacity?
If they had good policies, all I would care about is policies. If they had good policies, I don't know if I have any Mises people on my policy team. I might. I don't know. I don't ask to be forward with you. I don't ask what caucus you're part of. So I don't think I have any Mises people, but I might. It's possible. I wouldn't even know, right? My policies compared to most libertarians are much more, I guess, left friendly, if that makes any sense, than most libertarians, because I live in New York State and I need to make sure that I have policies that New Yorkers could accept while still being libertarian. Like I literally have a program to help people build out co-ops, which the Democrats even talk about, right? I have an actual program to do that. I have a program that will actually help to kind of have a negative income tax, which is a modified UBI plan, right? Which really, most libertarians don't even want, but that comes, from Milton Friedman. So it is libertarian based, the concept. So I don't know, if they had a good policy, I wouldn't throw a Mises Caucus person out if they had good policies. I mean, Dylan, to be forward, I asked you to join my policy team.
Yep, I was going to say that.
Ask, yes, I would. If you've got good policies, I'm in. That's where I'm in. So if they had good policies, yes, but it'd be because of good policies. That'd be it.
Okay. We're going to talk about Ukraine in a second, but I also want to finish on the idea of voting for libertarians on concept. And then we'll finally get to New York-centered questions. It's just for most people watching the show are not New Yorkers, so I want to make sure they have something to chew on as well. So,
oh, no worries whatsoever. The reason why you should vote for libertarians in general is you should be voting for third parties, period. Clearly, I am biased because I'm a libertarian, but I'm endorsed by the Forward Party. Andrew Yang and I were on stage at the Freedom Fest this last summer. I'm endorsed by Forward. If you don't like me, vote Green. You don't like Green, vote Forward. You don't like Forward, vote whatever. Vote third party. The two-party system is literally making things worse.
You're endorsed by the Forward Party.
The reasons why we are so... Say again?
You're endorsed by the Forward Party?
I am. Absolutely. I was literally on stage with Andrew Yang endorsing personally. Yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Because he understands the same thing that I understand, which is what I call the BRO program. BRO. Better ballot access, ranked choice voting, open primaries. It's the only way we can build coalitions. The way we fix this is to build coalitions against the establishment. And that's why everyone should be voting third party. Clearly, I think you should vote libertarian. But if you're not going to do that, then vote Forward, vote Green, vote third party every single time. If we don't turn this country into a multi-party democracy, this entire country is going to fall apart. Okay,
so I'll ask you about that in a second, but I wanted to ask you, what does the Forward Party stand for? This is something that's a lot of people have kind of trolled on the Forward Party for, is that a lot of people can't really pin down what they stand for. Besides, we're kind of, that Simpsons quote of not leftward but forward and twirling. It feels kind of weird politics speak.
Sure. No, the reason why I was happy to take the endorsement, which is why I'm happy to bring up the Forward Party, is because what we agree upon completely is what I just talked about. Changing the system to allow third parties to actually... Most people think all the time, well, the reason why you guys lose is because you have bad candidates, or the reason why you lose is because you can't raise money. No, the reason why we lose is because we literally can't get on the ballot. Because we literally can't... It cost me $300,000, Dylan, to try to get on the ballot in New York State. And once I got on, I got sued by the conservatives and Republicans and thrown off the ballot. And now I'm appealing to get back on that, which the lawsuits will cost me over $30,000. How is someone who wants to run going to be able to raise $400,000 and still run a campaign? So I've got to raise $500,000 to have any chance of doing anything. And I'm still in lawsuits and I still may not get on. That's common throughout the entire country. We want to change the system to where if you are an independent, that you will have a chance to create a coalition. And that is what I think Forward is about more than anything else. And that part I completely agree with, which is why I bring it up. If you want to fix those three things, let people get in the ballot, have ranked choice voting, have open primaries, I'm in.
So if somebody was to ask you what the Forward Party stands for, you would say the existence of third parties.
Correct. Breaking the system to allow for third parties to exist. Yes, and to function as fairly as the rest. And they do not now at all. Think about this. If independent parties could actually work, Bloomberg would have run independent. The guy Schultz from Starbucks would have run independent. You can't. They have more money than whatever, right? And they can't do it. They have realized they can't do it. This system is broken. Most who don't know this, in 2016 and 2020, the only third party that had ballot access in all 50 states was the Libertarian Party. The Greens only had like 40 states. Constitution Party like 25. You can't physically, and this is just to be clear, this just means your name is listed on a ballot, so if someone wants to choose you, they may. They stop that. How are we supposed to do anything when they won't let your name on the ballot? And my argument to a judge was very simple. There is literally no harm in having me on a ballot. If people don't want to vote for me, they just don't. And in 2018, they did it by the millions. So I literally have data proving that people can just not vote for me. But over 100,000 people did vote for me. So you are taking away the ability of 100,000 people to vote for the guy they want to. And the judges did not care. They threw me off anyway.
So I guess, like, do you think it might be difficult for people to like jump behind like a party, which is justification for existence is we should have a right to exist as a party, when people have personally held beliefs about issues like, you know, left wing, right wing, abortion, taxes, war, and they put their party, like their vote for a party who says we have a right to exist, and that's like their reason for existence. It's like it's a challenge. I agree. I think they may have to make some messaging changes. I would agree with you. I think it's challenging, right? It's very hard for that message to resonate without a crazy popular personality that can just draw people in, right? If you had like a celebrity, like, I don't know, who's the most popular celebrity now? Is Justin Bieber still popular? I don't know. Whoever is the popular guy of the day, if you have someone like that person show up and start saying, vote for me because I'm cool and you love me, maybe because it's just a popularity contest. But other than that, I think you're right. It's a challenge. They'll have to fix it. Okay. So I wanted to ask you now about the physical challenges that libertarians and all third parties are going to be facing. And I mean, my position on third parties is I'd probably be able to find a different party than the Democrats if like third parties were viable that I might throw my support behind, possibly. But
yes,
I feel like they're completely unviable, almost like it's like a lost effort. And I could
hear
have
that
more
almost every day, my friend.
And I feel like I could have a lot more influence over America's direction if I wanted to change how the Democratic Republican Party was in a caucus, or by doing something like the Tea Party movement did, or what MAGA did, or what I guess you could say maybe AOC, the Squad, or any of somebody on the other left side of the aisle did. Why would I put my support behind a movement that is structurally designed not to work?
It's a valid question. And what I would argue is lots of people had thought they could fix the system from within. And almost all of them have failed. I would argue all of them have failed. I think the Squad is doing nothing compared to what it could have been doing. So I don't think it's affecting the Democratic Party as much as people would think it is. I think both parties are still corporatists, regardless. So I don't think it's actually working as well as one might think. The Liberty Caucus in the Republican Party did not work at all. One of the reasons why Justin Amash walked away. He started it and he left because it didn't work at all. It just became, I don't know, let's support Trump 2 caucus, which is not working. The DSA, I think, right now is probably an exception at the moment locally. I would argue that at the national level, the DSA has not made anywhere near as much, gone as far as it would want to go at all. I think AOC, as a general rule, has not been anywhere near effective as she could have been. I think she's become more of a celebrity than an effective administrator. But locally, I think the DSA has been relatively effective, particularly here in New York City. They have a bunch of people on the city council, and they've been doing decent so far in the assembly also. I think they have 6 or 7, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure if there's any DSA members, they'll correct me. But I think it's 6 or 7 in New York State Assembly. So locally, I think that has worked here or there. The DSA style has worked. But overall, I feel like they become temporary. Tea Party was temporary. I would argue, I think that MAGA is going to be temporary. I think once Trump either has a terrible loss or decides to walk away or passes away, I think MAGA will also become temporary also. I think 5-10 years from now, we won't be talking about that. It'll be whatever the next thing of the day in the Republican Party will be. I think most of them just go away, and it goes back to being corporatists. It goes back to being establishment. It goes back to millionaires running the country.
So your thing is you're saying that nothing can fundamentally change in this country until we have third parties, is what you're saying.
That's what I believe.
Okay.
And the reason why I believe that is, as I go around the country, what I constantly hear, and I'll give you the example here in New York State that I know very well. I have thousands, if not more, Republicans saying, this is the year we have to vote for the Republican. He's gonna win and take it and do this. They say that constantly. He's gonna win. He's not gonna win. My state is almost 3-1 Democrat Republican. A Republican has not won a statewide election in my state in 20 years. Nothing, not senator, not governor, AG, nothing in 20 years. And the state's getting bluer, not redder.
Isn't that beautiful?
He's not gonna win. But they still think he's gonna win. Mm-hmm. So what do? They just keep voting for him anyway. And the Democrats, they just keep voting Democrat.
No, wait.
That's a bad thing.
I got you. Okay. If they want to win, then just vote for the winner, the Democrats. Problem solved.
It is. That's the problem. That's what's happening, right? And the problem with that is now Democrats don't see any reason to get better. They've been corrupt for years. And now, because now we have a one-party system, the Democrats have become corrupt and nobody cares because there's no repercussions. There's no chance of them being booted out ever. There's no chance of doing anything. Literally, and it is legal in my state. Not illegal. It's unethical, but illegal in my state for the governor to place people on boards, commissions and boards across the state, and to still take $44,000 in campaign contributions. That's totally fine. So it is legal pay to play in my state. And when Cuomo, my previous governor, actually put together a commission called the Moreland Commission to try to find out where the corruption was, they began to investigate him. He then disbanded the Moreland Commission. And his response was, oh, well done. That's how it works when it's a one-party system. But if it's a multi-party system, now we can create a coalition against the establishment when they are corrupt. And in any case, this isn't just Democrats. The same thing happens in Oklahoma to Republicans. Whoever's in charge of the one-party system becomes super corrupt. Then the people who are underneath them become semi-corrupt because they're just taking the crumbs from the people in charge. Yes, my point is there must be a third party. There must be a multi-party, not just third. There must be multiple parties to create coalitions. Otherwise, we get New York State. And people might go, well, great, it's run by Democrats. People are leaving my state like there's no tomorrow. We've lost so many people. We lost a congressperson. That is how bad my state is. People are leaving as fast as they possibly can. My state is not a good place to be. We spend the most money on education, and we rank around 42nd out of 51 if you count DC. That is not a good state. We are in trouble.
So you said that, these corporatist parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party.
Yep.
Why would you say the Libertarian Party is not corporatist or couldn't become corporatist if they grew? Considering that there's a lot of corporations who would love libertarian policies. I mean, lower taxes, less restrictions on safety regulations. Labor laws are going to be looser. I mean, to a lot of people like the Koch brothers, that might sound enticing.
Not at all. If that were true, they'd back us already. So no, it's not true. There are two things. One, could we become corrupt? 100%. We're just humans. Yes. But we can't become corrupt now because we don't have the cronies yet, right? You got to give us like 8-10 years of success before we become corrupt as the rest of us. But then hopefully at that point, there'll be another party coming up that won't have this, and we can keep moving. That's the point of having a vibrant multi-party democracy, right? The hope is you will always have the new party coming up that doesn't have the connections, that isn't actually corrupt yet. And right now, we are not corrupt. Could we become corrupt? Of course. I'm a human being, right? Of course I could become corrupt. I would hope I wouldn't, and I would try not to be. Doesn't mean I won't be. So that's number one. But number two, the other point is, no, in an actual libertarian world, if you see the policies that I actually put out, I never tried to help openly the corporate class. I always try to help the entrepreneur class. The entrepreneur class is the more independent class. Corporatists are almost never libertarians. They're almost always Republicans or Democrats. Entrepreneurs are very often libertarians. The libertarian world, if it goes to the world that we'd like it to be, you don't knock down a Goliath by creating another Goliath. You knock down Goliath by creating a whole bunch of Davids. And there's always lots and lots of Davids out there that will always knock down Goliaths. So in reality, no, we would be supporting it. As an example, I'll give you a very libertarian policy that does not help big business. And that is in New York State, if you want to be a small business owner, like a farmer, which I consider farmers small business owners, or you also want to be a small store owner or restaurant, and you agree that you will only sell within New York State, then you will be immune from all federal regulatory bodies. Now, that's very libertarians for removing regulations, right? So, oh my God, big business must love that. No, because what happens is the larger the federal government rules are so strict that only massive companies can do most of the work when it comes to farmers and when it comes to restaurants. So that means that if you don't have huge legal fees, if you can't pay the fees, you're actually at a disadvantage. Instead, if you want to do local things with local people, you may. Farm to table becomes much easier, right? Local slaughtering becomes easier. All those things become easier, not using there's a monopoly on slaughterhouses across the country, right? So that goes away for small farmers. So yes, that is absolutely a libertarian, mindset, and it helps the little guy.
So here's a question, and I'm.
Does that at least make sense to you? At least
I understand what you're saying, that not all the libertarian policies benefit big businesses, and you don't see like Bill Gates and all these really big businessmen backing the Libertarian Party. My question to you would be:
Koch brothers don't even back the Libertarian Party.
Do you think that people like the Koch brothers and Bill Gates and all these very successful businessmen, that a lot of them don't back the Libertarian Party, not because they don't agree with its policies, but because they don't see it as possible for success? That they're people who've built big companies, successful companies, and they're thinking like, I don't want to back a party that doesn't have any chance of success, and like in their minds, and even in my minds, if I'm completely honest. And so, but if the Libertarian Party was to see success, why wouldn't they want to go for a party that is known for its more lax regulation when it comes to ideology, which you can say that there's issues here or there that they might not like, because when they want to like stifle competition. But the average big businessman, like, do you really think they wouldn't be very pro Libertarian Party and try to put their money behind the candidates that back them ideologically, and then those candidates wouldn't give them political favors?
Let me touch two of those pieces. The first piece is part of the reason that we're not viable. Of course, that's why I'm pushing the third party piece. That's why I'm behind. I'm with the forward party. Yes, I think that's 100% accurate. That is one of the reasons. Yes. Do I think that if let's say all of a sudden I hit the lotto and I become the governor? Let's hope it works, right? I follow my Jesse Ventura model and I'm the governor. And all of a sudden people go, oh my God, the Libertarian Party is viable. And then next year we start winning across the country. And in 2024, we get 3 congressional seats. So now we're a viable party, right? Let's say that. God, I hope that happens. That'd be amazing. Let's hope that actually happens, right? And it does happen. And people go, my God, look, these guys are real. Would they start coming aboard? I think more would. Would the Bill Gates of the world, the big business? No, they are establishment. They have already bought and paid for the Democrats, Republicans. There's no way they're going to support us at all. We would still be a grassroots party for at least 10 years, if not after that. I mean, maybe 10 years. By that time, we'd be corrupted enough to where our congressman would take bribes and such. I'm not saying we wouldn't be. All I'm saying is we'd be the new kids on the block. We'd be the ones who are trying to make things change. We are not corporatists. If anything, we talk about regulatory capture. We try to stop those things. That's who we are as a party. Now, could we be corrupted? Of course. But I would hope if we create a world to where third parties are more valuable, that if we start doing that, people will go to the Greens instead, who will try to knock down the corporations. That will be awesome, and they'll move to the next level. So that is my entire point. The libertarian movement is not backed by big business. It isn't. One of the reasons is what you said, yes. The other one is our policies are not pro big business. We are about creating a whole bunch of Davids to knock down Goliaths. Could we be corrupted in 10 or 20 years? Of course, we're just people. We're not magical. I wish we were magical. It'd be awesome. But we're not. We're just people. Of course we could be. But our policy and our ideology is against it. So it will be harder to corrupt us compared to others. But of course we could be corrupted. But the hope is if we build if we build the right system out, there'll be more third parties to replace us, to get behind us, to push us in the right direction. If we had other third parties, it would push us in the right direction anyway. So the odds of all of us being corrupted would go down because the other parties could take us out. And what politicians care about more than anything else is being in power. I mean, they care about that more than anything else, more than the money, more than anything. Being in power is number one. If they actually believe they could be thrown out, they would change.
I want to be clear to my viewers that I'm not against third parties conceptually. I just think it's a lost cause, which is two separate issues. I assume Larry Sharpe has more of a difficult time convincing people that it's not a lost cause than people that third parties are a decent idea. And I do want to ask him about an issue that is a big problem right now. A lot of people are talking about it. What do you think of ranked choice voting? This is something that I assume would greatly help the Libertarian Party.
I love ranked choice voting because it deals with the biggest issue I have, which is I can't vote for you because the other guy will win. What ranked choice voting does is it allows you to have both offensive and defensive voting. So if you're a New Yorker, clearly you want me to be your governor because you're savvy. So of course you know that. So you want to vote for me. But you're worried if I vote for Larry Sharpe and I'm a Republican, the Democrat will win. If I'm a Democrat for Larry Sharpe, the Republican will win. I can't have that. So if you do ranked choice voting, you vote me as number one. And then if you're a Democrat, you vote Democrat number two, right? So if I don't win, your vote goes to the Democrat. You're voting both offensively and defensively. Why does that matter? Does it mean that I will win? It doesn't. But what it means is people will get an actual feel of what my support is, right? I'm polling right now at about 7% across New York State. For a third party, that's amazing. That is awesome for Libertarian to be polling at that high across New York State. But let's say I go to the election and I get, on the first round, I get 15% of the vote. Could you imagine that? 15%. I still lose, but I got 15% of the vote, and then we go down and Democrat wins. What does that tell the Democrat and the Republican? The policies that Larry Sharpe is talking about, people like. They care about those things. It matters. I better start doing something like that, or I'm going to lose next time, or I might lose next time. So even if I lose, I've still been able to push things forward. And the best example I can give you is in New York City, we had a party called the Rent is Too Damn High party. Some people may remember that party. It was kind of a joke, but it was serious. The guy was like, the rent's too damn high. I'm starting a party called the Rent's Too Damn High party. So if the rent is too damn high party gets 15%, what does that tell the people in charge? Deal with the rent. It's too damn high. If you don't deal with the rent, you're going to lose. It lets the people, there is no stronger protest than a vote against people. Mm-hmm. And if they see that people will show up and vote for the rent is too damn high party, you will see people deal with the rent or whatever is a specialized party. In my case, Libertarian. But Green Party, New York's not green. But imagine if the Green Party actually got 15% of the vote. Okay, we better do something because people want a greener New York. Done. That is the value of a third party. It does matter. Ranked choice voting makes that happen. And it also gives the opportunity of someone who, say I'm really popular in this case, right? And like I'm everybody's second choice's example. And if the Republican and Democrat can't get a majority, I could actually win a damn thing because I'm everybody's second choice. So that's how it could work.
Do you think what happened in Alaska was showing, because I assume you paid close attention with the ranked choice voting.
I did.
Do you think that was an example of ranked choice voting succeeding or failing in its intended purpose?
Well, it depends who implemented it. But in my case, totally successful. It showed that the people who actually wanted Sarah Palin to win was a certain percentage. The rest didn't want her to win. And that's okay, right? They pretend, well, most people wanted a Republican, so Republicans. Yeah, but it's not about the Republican. It's about the individual, and that's the point. I don't want it to be the two-party system, first past the post. I want it to be the person who will make the most people happy, the most people satisfied, that person win. In the case of Alaska, that's what happened. Most people did not want Sarah Palin to win. A chunk did, and we saw that. The other people did not. And so the right person won.
Okay. Now let's talk about your policies. So
please,
what would you say is your number one policy? What's the most important thing for you as a candidate running in New York? If you can only tell one, like somebody's running by you and you have to yell to them your policy that matters to you, what would you yell towards them?
I only have like a couple seconds?
Like, just, you can give me
can I do the whole policy?
You can do the whole policy, sure.
Can I tell them the whole policy, or do I only have a couple seconds?
You're like running next to them, telling them the whole policy.
Okay, so I can tell them the policy, okay. If I just was yelling at them, I would say, the number one thing I say, we have to keep New Yorkers in New York. And all New Yorkers would go, you're right. And sadly, no one's talking about that. That's the number one issue that we have to do. New Yorkers everyone knows it's so bad that Pennsylvania is buying up extra U-Hauls because they run out of U-Hauls in New York State and they drive to Pennsylvania to rent a U-Haul. That's how bad it is. So yes, that's the number one. It's a thing in New York, which I warned people about this 2 years ago, that they would eventually just have people in New York packing up and leaving their houses, not caring if they have a mortgage, not caring if they have a rent, just literally packing up and leaving the house as is. If you go to New York State, is it NewYorkState.gov or New York NYS.gov? You can find at the state website a thing called zombie houses. They've titled it zombie houses. There's enough houses just being left abandoned in New York State. That's how bad it is. So the first thing I would tell someone they're running by is, we've got to stop people from leaving our state. And if they care at all, they'll go, yes, you're right. And they would stop and then listen. The policy that's the most important. It's finding a way of paying for the services that New Yorkers still need without raising taxation anymore. We already have our budget at $220 billion, the weaning population. We actually spend, with the exception of Alaska, which literally writes checks to their people, we spend the most per capita than any state. No one else spends more than we do. And we still have people leaving. And what I think we should do is create what I call the NIST, New York State Social Trust. It is similar to what they do in Norway, similar to do in Singapore, and it's a trust that has permanent capital and private capital invest in the trust. It's not debt. They get paid a dividend by investing a yearly dividend based upon the amount of revenue New York State makes. So if New York State makes more revenue, they get a larger dividend, less revenue, less dividend. So the dividend is based upon the revenue of New York State. If we can get more private and permanent capital to invest in this trust, we can build the trust up to about $1 trillion in about 4 years. That'll match Singapore and match Norway. If we can't do that in New York City, which is literally the financial capital of this country, shame on us. We should be able to do this. Let us do something else. That will actually pull more money out of the real estate market, because right now permanent capital and private capital is buying up tons of real estate. As they buy up real estate, they make the rent, make too many people renters because people can't afford to buy houses. Nothing but a bad thing. As more money comes out of that and goes into this, hopefully it'll be easier for average New Yorkers to buy a house. But I'm still not done. Once we do this, within 2 years, we can actually pay for schooling from the New York State Social Trust. If we do that, school tax goes away. When school tax goes away, what happens now is about, when we live in New York State, your property tax goes down by about 50%, which means the average New Yorker will have a break in property tax. You then add on top of that our seniors who are packing up and moving to Florida in droves. We then do that, give them half a property tax break, and then once you hit 65, your property tax goes down 5% every year to 85. Why? This way you'll actually stay in New York, retire in New York. You won't go to a nursing home, my hope is, because the state pays for nursing homes. You'll stay in your home, and you'll spend your pension here. We have pensioners now who are making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, and they're spending it in Florida. I want them spending it here in New York. So we do that, that will help. But I'm still not done. Within 3 years, we should be able to create what I call the GIB. The GIB is the Graduate Income Boost. It's based on the negative income tax idea of Milton Friedman. Every person in New York State who's been here for at least a year, we might go 18 months, I'm not sure on the number, but I think about a year, will be eligible for it. It's an $18,000 a year stipend. For every dollar that you make, you lose 50 cents of your stipend. So you're able to work your way up to $36,000 a year. You're a working mom, you're a mom at home, you're someone who's disabled, whatever the case may be, you can't work, you're a student. You're able to get that check every month and move up forward. That's paid for by the NIST, not by taxation. And the best part about it is you don't lose federal. If you have federal issues, you still get your federal stuff, but it would eliminate the need for any state public assistance. So it actually would save money for the state, still allow people to be able to work their way off. No benefit cliff that we have now, right? Benefit cliffs happen all the time. Benefit goes away. And now that would help New Yorkers. They would still have federal benefits on top of it. Lastly, within 4 years, if we do it right, we can end the state income tax. If we end the state income tax, every New Yorker by default gets a raise, and more businesses will stay, particularly small businesses, will stay in New York State. So the NIST is my biggest, strongest piece because it pays for goods without having to raise the tax base. And in fact, if we do it right, we can lower the tax base, still provide services. That's the libertarian answer.
So what you're saying is that you can, with this proposal, in 4 years, raise $1 trillion from private
Correct.
Investors and what was the other? Private investors and what?
Permanent capital.
And permanent capital. Can you explain? Is the state putting any money into this NIST?
None. Well, it would start. Yes, we would have to start with a debt alone initially, about $80 billion, which is our tax revenue is about $80 billion. So we'd start with $80 billion to start. Yes, and that will be debt. The right now the state has about a $400 billion debt, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, about $400 billion if I'm right. So we'd have to have debt for that initially, yes, but that would be paid off also. We would service our debt also.
Okay, so when is going to be the pitch to these companies if the idea is like they're throwing all this money into this program, which then pays for the education of every child? Like, what's the pitch? How do they make their money back? Because there is a potential that you throw your public money at it, a few investors come, the whole thing crashes, and then you're in a worse debt position.
100%. It is absolutely possible.
Then nobody has education.
It is possible it fails
because the education system collapsed.
No. If that were happen, we would still keep the same system, right? You will never hear me ever abolish anything without something already refilling it, right? So I wouldn't just go, that's it, no schools. I would never do that, right? That's why I said within a couple of years you could do it. You'd have to keep the same system now, even though it's completely broken. It is a system. I'm not going to take away somebody's seat there. You've never heard me say that ever. I'm not taking away say that. People need services. People need help. I just think I have a better way of achieving it. And if I'm wrong and I fail, you keep the old system, right? I think I'm right. Obviously, I wouldn't be saying this. If I'm right, the old system goes away. This system replaces it. Awesome. I win. If I'm wrong and you're right, and they decide we don't like you for whatever reason, we're not doing it, then we keep the old system. There's no loss, if that makes any sense, except time. We lose time. That's true.
And money.
That's all we would lose. Well, not much. I mean, it wouldn't matter much. We're already massively in debt. I mean, it would mean nothing. We wouldn't even feel a difference.
I mean, if you're trying to raise
massively in debt,
you're trying to raise $1 trillion in 4 years, like that's going to take a substantial public investment.
No, not necessarily. It all depends upon how people.
You said
how much
the
they
budget
trust
for New York is $220 billion a year, correct?
Correct.
So raising $1 trillion with that being your budget in 4 years, that's more than the entire budget of New York 4 years combined.
No, New York's not putting the money in.
I know, but what you're saying is that's
it would
a lot
be valuable,
of money to raise.
right?
You have to invest money into that.
100%. You're right. Don't get me wrong. It's not like it's gonna be 5 minutes to do this. You're totally correct. This is a challenging thing. However, I'm going off of models that are currently still working. Right? If you look around the world, there are models that this is actually working, that people are going out of the way. Permanent capital is going out of its way to invest in now. They're doing it now. So could the entire environment change the next 4 years where they wouldn't want to do it? I guess it could happen. You're right. It's possible. But right now, this model is working. There are several countries right now where 20% of their entire budget is being paid for by a fund like this. So this model exists. It does work. We will follow the models that's working now. If the environment changes, we'll have to change the model, obviously, or it might fail. I'm not saying I wish this was the perfect answer that will solve everything. What I know right now is the current model is failing miserably. We are literally ranked 42nd and 44th, whether you look at our total school system or our graduation rate, or whether you look at just our early education. New York State's failing massively. If you are a person of color in Rochester, the odds of you graduating high school is less than 15%. So the system we have now is a steaming pile of garbage. That's where it is now. And all we want to do is put more money into it, which just makes it worse. We've been putting more money into it for literally decades. It has only been failing. So I'm sure the current system sucks. That I'm sure of. My system might not work. It might not, but at least it could work. And it's based on something that actually does work. It's not based on throwing more money at it. So that's why I think it can work. Does that make sense, at least, what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess the last question on this, because this was a question I asked and I still haven't gotten an answer to it. How are you going to convince these people to get $1 trillion in 4 years? Yes.
This is how. They are already dropping hundreds of billions of dollars in things like real estate and in other investments throughout the entire world. Most of it's in real estate. Real estate is a multi-trillion-dollar investments across the entire world already. As people believe that these investments, real estate investments, for those of you who know the financial world, if you're listening and you're watching the financial world, there's a chunk of permanent capital that all they really want is decent return, just decent, very safe. There's a chunk that want that. There's another chunk that wants more, volatile and bigger returns. Depends upon where you are in the world we're trying to achieve. I would want to get the people who want, the kind of people who used to spend their money on municipal bonds, as an example. Municipal bonds is trillions of dollars throughout the world in municipal bonds, right? Munis, tons, lots of money in that. That has been not as good because of low interest rates. So now the coupon has been lower than it's been in the past, which has pushed permanent capital to something else, which has been real estate. The reason why they like real estate is they can invest in real estate, they can borrow against it, then the rents they charge pay for the debt, service the debt, then they sell it in 4 or 5 years, and they make a profit. That's been a common thing that they've done for the past, 10 years or so. Kind of since the 2008 crash, when they reduced interest rates so low, all of them started buying up real estate. I think those dollars that are going to real estate could go into this fund, as long as they feel safe. My goal, as you're saying, how do I convince them, is to convince them that New York State is going to stay solvent. That New York State's not going to go under. That with this, we will stay solvent, we will keep bringing in revenue, which means you'll keep getting your dividend. And you will get a dividend in perpetuity. This will become a permanent fixture that they will get. And if they do that, what these guys want to do is they'll borrow against it. So they will use New York State's trust as leverage to borrow more money. Now, that may have been too much for some people who aren't in the finance world, but in the finance world, that's a thing they do. So they could use their investment in the trust as a way to borrow more money to buy more things, which is what big permanent capital does. It just buys more stuff, gets more investments, and so on. That is why I believe it will work.
Okay, I do want to get on to a few other issues. I guess the next question would be, what do you think about gun control? New York, of course, with the recent Buffalo shooting, it was a massive tragedy. And in response to that, a lot of people started, examining possibly tougher gun control laws. And so if you were to face a national tragedy like that, if you were governor of New York and you were to hear calls from some of your constituents and people in offices of power like, hey, we need to toughen, for example, toughen the state's red flag laws, or we need to do this, or we need to do that, what would be your response to them? And do you want to possibly loosen or restriction existing gun control laws in New York?
The Buffalo shooting had the most strictest gun laws in the nation. We've just added 10 more gun laws into New York State. And the Working Families Party governor candidate, Jumaane Williams, said those 10 laws will do nothing to stop gun violence. Nothing. And he's right. All of our gun laws since probably the SAFE Act of 2013 have done nothing but virtue signal. They haven't done anything to make anything safer or better or stronger at all. They've just made the legal gun owner a criminal. They've created a black market in my state where people now lie about what guns they have, what ammunition they have, because now they're going to become criminals for what they've already bought. The gun laws in New York State since 2013 have been nothing but bad. They've helped no one and hurt people who are legal gun owners, particularly upstate New York, where gun ownership is a big deal. Isn't that big of a deal in the city, obviously, but it's much more common in upstate New York. So yes, I will revert back to pre-SAFE Act gun laws. Correct, absolutely. Because I would ask a New Yorker, what was the tragedy that happened in 2013 in New York State that made the SAFE Act, required, necessary? There was nothing. Nothing happened in New York State. New York State didn't have shootings like this. Didn't exist. The first one we've had really is Buffalo. And that happened after we had all of the red flag laws are already there in New York State already when Buffalo happened. We already had the SAFE Act when Buffalo happened. We had all the laws when Buffalo happened. Here's the problem that people don't want to accept, and I'm happy to tell anybody who wants to hear this, this is the reality. The reason why we're having these shootings, the violence in New York, is two things. One is the mass shooter like the guy in Buffalo. And the other one is gang violence. Those two things we're doing. Both of those were exacerbated and expanded in New York State because of our COVID lockdowns. The lockdowns took our youth, took them out of work, out of school, put them on the streets. We then shut everything down. We made a massive black market, and the gangbangers said, thank you for recruiting the people that we need. Come on in. And the gangbangers got a bunch of people, and now we have literally daylight shootings because people are enforcing their contracts in the black market by shooting people. That's what's happening in our cities. Outside of our cities, we have loners who haven't gone to school in 2 years, who don't have any friends. All of these mass shootings, there are two things. They are public suicides, and they are I'll show you. That's what they are. They are young men who are lost and broken. What is killing our children and what is causing all these killings is not guns. It is lack of purpose, lack of community, and loneliness. And we won't touch those three important issues. If we touch those three important issues, we can solve this issue without having to add any more gun laws or change anything. We can go before 2013, 2012 laws in New York State, and we're good. We weren't having mass shootings before that. It wasn't a thing in New York State.
Okay, so I guess I have a few questions, but my first question would be like, when you say like the causes for this are things like loneliness, right? Yep. That might be true to some degree, but how much power can you as governor legislate loneliness in comparison to legislating something like a red flag law?
Sure. I love that. It's much easier to legislate a red flag law. You're totally right. And what the red flag law does is it requires people to report. And you might go, that's a great thing. It's not a great thing. Because now when a person has a choice of reporting or not, they will always report because they'll be liable if they don't. You might go, well, isn't that a good thing? No, it's not important. Why? New York City does not have a red flag law when it comes to terrorism. We just have a saying. It's going to sound crazy. If you see something, say something. It's everywhere. It's in our subways. It's on billboards everywhere. You know what happens in New York State? We stop terrorism by calling the cops. That literally happens in New York City all the time. That's a thing. It happens. They actually have statistics that they actually say. The New York City cops will actually give statistics every year. How many people called? How many things were stopped? They do it on their own. See something, say something. But once you have red flag laws, you know what happens? You know what gets punished the most? Veterans. Veterans are the most apt to have PTSD and other invisible illnesses like TBI and such. And they also want to have firearms. But now if they do anything that sounds anything weird at all, people report on them because they have to, versus just reporting on them when there's a problem. And what do I mean by that? The Buffalo shooter was reported on, and there wasn't a red flag law. And the cops did not do their job. That's a fact. You can look it up. People reported him. Why? Because they saw him, and there was no red flag law. So all you've done is said, report him again. They did report him. The cops didn't do their job. The red flag laws don't help at all, but they're easy. You're right. So they make more red flag laws. I'm saying do things that will change everything, that will shift how our youth is seen and how it works. And one of the things is changing education. Education should not be K through 12. It should be pre-K through 10. And at 10th grade, if someone is done at 10th grade and they finish their schooling and they're able to do it, they should take a test. If they pass a test, they get a high school diploma. At that point, New York State still has to pay for the last two grades. In our Constitution, in New York State, education is a right. So New York State must pay for grades 1 through 12. We do create other things to pay for K and pre-K, which I'm okay with. I don't mind that at all. But I'm just saying that's not in our Constitution. We have to pay for grades 1 through 12. So the last 2 years of high school, instead of kids being unhappy and broken and sad and pushed by people that go into college, they don't want to go into college, and told that if you want to be a tradesman, that you're dumb or you're not smart, which is what happens across my state every single year. Instead, you get $20,000 in an account that goes to any school you want. You got 5 years to use it. Take your last 2 years and start thinking about what you want to do with your life. So instead, go to a trade school if you want to. Go to a prep school. You want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or something, whatever. Go to an associate's degree. Go to a school that will set you up for college so that now you have purpose at 17, 18 years old. And by the time you go to college, you're ready for college. It's not 13th grade. And right now, the average kid takes about 6 years to graduate high school. If we prep them effectively, to graduate college. If we prep them effectively, they can graduate college in 3 years instead of 6 and have less debt and less problems, all those things.
How does that?
What, please?
How does that fix the loneliness that you said is one of the causes of this?
Yep. One of the reasons, as I said, 3 things though, not just one: loneliness, lack of community, lack of purpose. Okay. 3 pieces. It is only loneliness, but they're related. So imagine you're 16 years old now. And right now in New York State, what do? You go to whatever high school you're going to. There's bullies there, people who don't like you, whatever. You're doing stuff you don't want to do. You're learning stuff you're never going to use ever in your life. Whatever. You're lonely. We see it all the time. We see it constantly. But if instead you have to pick a school, you say, you know what? I like computers. I'm going to go to a computer school. I like art. I'm going to go to an art school. I want to be a doctor. I'm going to go to biology. Whatever. I'm going to go to a school that I want to go to. What happens? In that school, and teachers, when I tell them this, they love this. Kids that go into that school, they're kids who chose that school. You will have less bullying because kids who don't want to be in school aren't in that school. They're in some other school. Or they're in trade school. Or they're learning how to be a mechanic. Or they're learning how to be an AC guy, whatever the thing is they want to do. You will have less bullying. This is not a magic pill. It doesn't make everything great. It makes things better. So all of a sudden now you have that. So now people are doing things. Teachers have a class filled with students who all want to be there. It changes the dynamic of teaching. So now all of a sudden you've got more students thinking differently, deciding what they want to do. Will they make mistakes? Of course they will. They're just kids. They're humans. But the price for failure at 16 is nothing compared to the price for failure at 26. So now they may make a mistake. Great. You still got 5 years to use this money. You made a mistake. You don't want to be a construction worker. You want to be a biologist. Awesome. Go to that. Whatever. You've got a couple years to figure yourself out, to prep yourself for college. You have different purposes, different friendship spheres, and different ideas, giving you that community back, giving you some purpose back, which means you probably less chance that you'll be lonely. Now, you might still be lonely. Again, this is not a magic pill. It isn't the only thing. But you asked one thing we could do as governor. That's one thing I can do as governor. Of course there is more, but that's one of them. Absolutely. I could fix family court. Family court's a disaster. It tears up people. It breaks up families. It makes kids hate their mother and father. It's a whole other piece you got to fix family court. That's a whole different issue. So there are many things. Or you can pass a red flag law and change nothing. Or you can do the detailed things that I talked about, which are difficult and take time and money and energy.
Well, I mean, you're right that this isn't a cure-all, because it wouldn't necessarily stop somebody from just now shooting up their trade school at age 17
It would. No, it would lessen the odds. Yes, I'll tell you exactly why. Because if the person actually likes the trade school, assuming they picked it, and if they actually have something to do in the trade school, they have purpose.
But
if you have purpose, you don't shoot up the school.
The Buffalo shooter wasn't a customer of the local grocery store. He hated black people, right? So I don't.
Yes.
Like I don't know how that would.
I'm happy to explain this.
I don't know if he hated the Cheerios.
Happy to explain this.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm happy to explain this. The issue is he was sitting at home by himself with no purpose except to be radicalized on the websites. But if that guy was in a school, or if he was building a boat, or if he was being a biologist out in the ocean, or whatever the hell he wanted to do, he wouldn't be at home by himself radicalizing himself. That's the point. The two things that usually are true about the people who are shooters. One, they're almost always a male without a girlfriend, and they're almost always on some form of psychotropic drug. That's not a 100% rule, but it's a good 90% rule. Those two things tend to be true. Well, if he's out doing other things, he's not getting radicalized on websites all day long. He's doing the websites he's watching are the one that talk about the whales that he wants to meet when he's running outside in the ocean, or about the I don't know, the refrigerator he's building or something.
You said something about psychotropic drugs. You would say it was more the mental illness, not the taking of drugs to try to treat mental illness. That would be the issue at hand here, right?
Of course, that's a sign, okay. Right? Look, not having a girlfriend doesn't mean you're unhappy. It doesn't. Not having a relationship doesn't mean you're unhappy. It doesn't. Being on some form of therapeutic drug doesn't mean you're unhappy. But if you have both of those things almost every time, it's probably a sign that you have an issue somehow. You're either unhappy or you have a mental illness, or probably the case is they're somehow hurting each other. They're making things worse, right? You're lonely, making your mental illness worse, or you have mental illness making your loneliness worse. The odds are those two things together are making things worse.
So back to the red flag law. You said it accomplishes nothing. But I know in my state, in the state of Maryland, we also have red flag laws. And it has at least stopped dozens of instances, and many of them be related to schools, of people making possible shooter threats. And then it's put before court, and they end up removing firearms from the vicinity of that child or a very young man who is going through all this that you're talking about. And so you say it does nothing, but there are instances of this going through the proper procedure and guns being taken out of the hands of people who very obviously could hurt people. And in Maryland, it has had particular success in my state. What you said about red flag laws, this idea of like, well, people are basically forced to report. That's not true of all red flag laws. It's true. I believe it's true of the New York red flag laws, but you could.
Yes, it is.
But I could easily say to you, well, then what about a different state's red flag laws where you take the requirement to report and you have a system in place where people could go report, hey, my neighbor's kid was talking about shooting up the school the other day. I think the courts and the police should take a look at this, and then they have a way to.
I wouldn't be against that.
Okay, so
I wouldn't be against that concept. I mean, I'm not against people reporting people who are dangerous. I'm not. And my point is, we already do it. So you're saying that this law helped. I don't know if that's true. Those people might have done it anyway. They might have reported anyway. They might have called the cops anyway, right? People call the cops on 9/11 bombers. People do this when they see things that are wrong, and the FBI screwed that up. So people call law enforcement often. If you're telling me I want to have a red flag law that simply makes law enforcement more effective or does a job better, I'm open to that idea completely. If you're telling me I want a red flag law that would allow the system to work better, I'm not against that at all. My issue is you're now forcing people to report who wouldn't normally report, which means now you have, and you see this all the time, maybe it stopped something, maybe, but it also put literally hundreds, if not thousands, of spouses in jail because people use the red flag law to punish their spouses because they're mad at them because family law is broken, which is why I brought up family law. Family law is completely broken in my state. I don't know about your state. It is broken in my state to the point where people go to jail with no due process. People get arrested with no due process. People get literally they get papers put against them without even being in court, not even knowing. That happens in family court in my state. I don't know your state, but you fix that, I'm okay with it.
I guess for me, like, there was an instance with the Buffalo shooter where a teacher saw some of what was going on and they didn't fill out the paperwork that would have started the process to have this firearm removed under the red flag laws. They ignored it. And so I guess if they ignored it, and as far as I know, they're not in prison, they're not facing any jail time for ignoring it. And so my question to you would be, if it's so stringent, how were they able to just completely get off, even though they could have filled out the paperwork and maybe this gun could have been removed from that?
Maybe I don't know the specifics of that law. Perhaps all they had to do was make the initial conversation. Perhaps, maybe, I don't know. I don't really know.
Do you think teachers should? But my point is,
if you want to make it easier, if that's your law, I'm not against that. If you want to make it, my point is, in many cases, you find the cops and or the judicial system doesn't do its job. If you're saying you want to make them more responsible, if you're saying you want me to make the state more responsible, maybe I might be okay with that. That's a discussion we can have.
Do you think if a teacher sees something that could be interpreted as a threat of violence in any manner, that they should be required by law to report it?
No. They should be able to be a teacher and decide if it makes sense to report it or to talk to kids or to talk to the parents or to talk to the principal or whatever they think is correct. Because the second you add the cops in, that kid is going to have a record. That kid is going to be scarred, whether they meant it or not. So no, give the teacher enough. I mean, maybe you don't trust teachers. Maybe you don't trust administrators. I mean, I get why you might not, but why are they any better than cops or anybody else if you're going to go that route? If I'm going to trust anybody in this situation, I'd rather trust the people who are there with the kid. Is the kid actually just drawing a gun because they happen to like a character they saw on TV? Or is the kid drawing a gun because they're ready to shoot somebody? Let the teacher have a conversation and figure this out.
I guess the reason why I would say possibly the court or the police might need to get involved in these instances and their judgment might be better is because the police and the court system will have more information at its disposal and more resources to make an assessment. The teacher cannot, for example,
You're asking me as a libertarian to put cops in charge of that? No way. Nope.
You don't think
I want to give cops more power?
You don't think?
No, thank you.
I'm asking you. That. So you do not think police should make the assessment of whether somebody's at risk to shoot up a school?
I mean, if they're in the situation, yes. Like the guy's holding the gun, yes. Then cops, yes. If the guy's physically holding the gun, yes. If some guy is saying things or doing things, let the teacher decide whether they should have the cops involved or not. So let's say, for example, I'll give you a good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Some kid yells I'm gonna kill you or whatever to his friend. If the teacher has to respond, they're gonna call the cops. That kid, if he's 16 or older, is gonna be arrested and probably charged with assault. How do I know that? That shit already happens. Now, did he really mean it? Maybe. Let a teacher decide. Whoa, what's going on here? You guys fighting? What's going on? If he's like, I'm gonna get him, he's serious, call the cops. No worries. No worries. I don't believe that the average teacher's gonna be like, oh, he's serious, let's not call the cops. And how do I know that? Because I see it in my city and my state all the time. Teachers and people do make the call to the cops. They don't have to be required. If you're saying I want to make it easier for them, okay, maybe a special call-in line, a special website, whatever. I'm fine with that. But what I don't want is a bunch of kids having their lives ruined because people are scared. That's the wrong answer.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the last topic of the night. And
at least answer your question. I don't want you to think I dodged any question. I'm trying to give you honest answers.
You didn't dodge my question there. You didn't dodge it. No worries. So my last question of the night is the question that's, of course, the most important to me. It's very important to my viewers. And it's back to what we started the show to talk about. And I think we should end it. And that is Ukraine. Last time we had a conversation, it was foreign policy based. We had a very long back and forth about when, is it moral to get involved in wars? And when would somebody put their support behind a moral war? And since that has happened, since that conversation, I would personally make the assertion that that moral war has reared its head. And that's why I've even committed myself to go to the country and film.
Nothing but respect, brother.
I appreciate that. And so my question to you would be, looking back on that conversation, would you say this is one of those wars that we were talking about, like a moral war where the United States is on the right side of history here and supporting Ukraine?
Please don't be angry at me. I haven't spent enough time knowing exactly how this war is going, to be forward with you. It has not been a priority in my life with me running for office here in New York. So it's hard for me to give an answer. I will give you from what I know, but that may not be the stuff I tell you may not be accurate. If that makes any sense. So I'm gonna plead ignorance off the bat for my answer. Generally speaking, I will always say no. That is where I begin. I begin at no, and then you gotta convince me to get to yes. I don't start at yes and convince me to no. I start at no and convince me to yes. I guess my biggest worry is, are we, and the meme I've seen, which is why my head goes to this, is are we fighting the Ukrainian war to the last Ukrainian? Right? That is my worry. I would say if we're gonna do this, if we're going to, then why aren't American troops on the ground? Why aren't we just fighting an actual war against the Russians? I think that's where my head is. If this is true, and this is the right side of history, and this is the right thing, then why aren't U.S. armored divisions on the ground there now? Why haven't Marines invaded Crimea? That would be my answer. If I think that this is really the thing, why aren't we committing? And that's kind of a question, and I'm sorry, I can't give you a good answer, Dylan. I apologize. I'm just trying to be honest with you, as I always am.
Are you cool if we transition this for the end of this discussion? We've only got 10 minutes left from an interview to a conversation. Okay, just making sure, because hey, I don't want to dominate it if you don't want that. But I guess for me, the first thing I would say is recently we've had a lot of really good news with the Kherson counteroffensive. I was in Mykolaiv, which is the frontline city during the launch of the counteroffensive, and the explosions were so heavy that it kept me up. And for the first time in the world, it was Ukrainian explosions, not Russian explosions, because of how hard they were hitting the lines. We're hearing a lot of good news. So right now, I have decent reason to feel optimistic. Obviously, the conditions can change. I'm not a military expert, but I'm positive to think that you understand Ukraine's struggle and you think it's a moral one. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're sold on America supporting. No, that's what America's role here is. And so, what could you repeat?
My worry, to be clear on this, is if we're saying that this is the moral
why don't
war,
we have troops? I can answer
as we said in World War I and World War II, then there should be American troops on the ground. We should be prepared to say, this is worthy of us fighting. Why aren't American troops? Why aren't American planes? Why aren't we fighting these guys?
I guess my response would be that the conditions are different than World War I and World War II in one key factor. Okay. And that is the introduction of the nuclear weapon. that this type of weapon is so different than what we had during the First World War and the Second World War, except for the end of the Second World War when we dropped that atomic hellfire on the Japanese twice. With that element being introduced, it is very, very risky to have Russia and America go directly head to head and fight. And that's why you see in the Cold War, strategists all the time, for example, us, and people forget this, and China funded the Mujahideen. People forget China did it as well because of the Sino-Soviet split. Russia was involved in Vietnam. This happened like all across the Cold War, and the reason they had to do that was because nuclear weapons could end the world. It's the same reason the Russians panicked during all the Taiwan Strait crises, because it was like, China's a nuclear state now, this could end differently. And so I think America's doing everything it can within its power without risking the entire world possibly going kablooey. This is why we're not directly committing troops, but we're committing the quote unquote, and I know it's weird to use this unironically, but we're committing the arsenal of democracy, so to speak, for this fight. We're committing everything we can within reason. And so is Europe as well, which is taking a lot of the economic brunt in response to this from the Russians. And so I would say that's the reason we can't, but we're giving them all the tools they want to fight. And I would say when it comes to fighting to the last Ukrainian, I quite honestly, and people would say, oh, it's government funded tours. I'm a freelancer. I'm accredited by the Ministry of Defense, but they don't tour me everywhere. I'm usually ingrained with aid workers and NGOs. I can't find a Ukrainian who's like, we should give up Crimea, we should give up the Donbass, we should give this up. Most polling seems to indicate that Ukrainians don't want to give up their territory. 89% of Ukrainians from the last poll I saw do not want to give up any territory, and that includes Crimea. So when we start talking about the Donbass and all this, like, that's already out of the question for most Ukrainians. The last poll, I checked the methodology on it, they had a 2,000 person sample size. It was like 95 to 98% of Ukrainians believed in victory. Like, this idea of fighting to the end, much more support than Russians supporting the war, the invasion, which isn't surprising considering they're the victim here, and much more support than we even see in America, in Europe, who isn't the country being bombed. And so when I hear a concern of fighting to the last Ukrainian, the idea that we're using them as a proxy to just undermine Russia, I would say...
That is my worry, yes.
I would say that while that could be the goal of certain American strategists, at the end of the day, Machiavellian people could end up being on the right side of history. An example of this could be someone like Joseph Stalin. Nazism was a uniquely evil force in the world, but he happened to be on the right side of history when it came to World War II because he was fighting Adolf Hitler. And so even if there is some Machiavellian level to support, even though I do believe there's an ideological basis as well, I think you should just look at that as kind of like, that's how these international affairs are managed. During the American Revolution, I think the American Revolution was the right thing. I believe monarchy is an inherently wrong system. I don't think the French were supporting us when it was the French royalist government was because they believed in like the American Revolution's fundamental principles of Magna Carta. No, they didn't even have the Magna Carta. So they didn't believe in any of that.
But let me use that example as one, right? I have a question and then an example. While the French supported us, us winning took down the French monarchy. So if you're a French monarch, you probably shouldn't have supported us. So I'm just saying that, and I don't want that to happen to us. I don't want this to be another Vietnam for us, right? Vietnam was horrible for us as a nation. It began to break the systems that we had in place. It was bad for us as a nation. It wasn't good for us at all. So many people were wounded. So many people were hurt. Nothing but bad. So my worry is it that? But the last piece I'll bring up, which is my other worry is, how does this end, right? My worry also is with them using the American resources, American GPS, all those things, that eventually this turns into a hot war in some way anyway. That's my other worry, is that eventually troops will come down eventually anyway, which I'm worried about that too. And I'm also worried about a desperate Putin dropping a tactical nuke in Western Ukraine. I'm worried about all those things, right? And I don't know if any of them are realistic at all, to be fair. I haven't spent enough time in it. But all of those things worry me, of course. And there's another piece. If I'm going to sit here and say...
Could I address those three first? I don't want to forget them.
Please, yeah.
So
go ahead.
What was the first one again? I think it...
The first one was, I'm worried that this will be a Vietnam.
Oh, yeah.
The second one was, how do I end it? And the third one is, is there going to be a nuclear bomb dropped in Western Ukraine?
So I think the first thing when it comes to Vietnam, I do think this is like Vietnam, but not for us. I think it's Vietnam for the Russians. It's hard to really paint America's Vietnam because my grandfather fought in Vietnam and he was the man who raised me, and it was you couldn't talk to him about what he saw there because of how brutal of a war it was. But the thing is, we're not sending any Americans to go over there and die. If you're an American coming over here to die or risk your life, I'm not a soldier, but you're like me. You're going there of your own free will, deciding that this is a struggle that you believe in, and therefore you're committing your life to it, right? Sure. And so this can't be like Vietnam because we're not fighting in the jungles. If anything, we're in the position that the Soviets were during Vietnam, where we're supporting an independence struggle that I would say is also probably less brutal than Ho Chi Minh's army, probably doing less amounts of torture that we know. Not that it hasn't done anything wrong, of course. Nothing is perfect, as you would know from your own party politics we were talking about earlier. So I would say that 100%. I don't have any concern when it comes to America turning into a Vietnam. Now, whether it turns into a Vietnam as in the Ukrainians are the Vietnamese and the Russians are us, if we're talking about that ultimately, that's their decision if they are going to be willing to, how much are they willing to give for an independent struggle, which is what this is fundamentally. It's an independent struggle as Ukraine. If Vladimir Putin makes a speech before invading that Ukraine is an artificial state, I think that is the tone that set like the Russian message on this invasion. We're hearing a lot less about NATO expansion ever since the invasion started, and it seems to be a lot more when you look at Russian propaganda about Ukraineness and Western corruption and homosexuality corrupting Ukraine and like these Western ideals. So I would say that I have no concern about America, like it being in Vietnam from our perspective. How does this end? Personally, I would like to see this with the end of any Russian occupation of Ukrainian territory. That should be our starting position. I think that's a reasonable starting position. Even
Donbass area, everything?
Everything.
Get out of everything?
Everything, including Crimea. That I think should be.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. The American Revolution was radical.
That scares me back to the other piece, right? If the Putin regime sees that happening, let's say you're right. I mean, again, I'm ignorant here, but I'm going to take what you're saying is true. Mm-hmm. You're right. The Ukrainians are starting to win this thing. We're supporting them, and they're starting to win this thing. How desperate does Putin get? And does he drop that nuke? Does he do that? Does he declare war? Does he do a massive draft? Does he do the things that we would like him to not do, right? I mean, in Vietnam, to your example, in Vietnam, there were many people who wanted to drop a nuclear bomb, who wanted to go nuclear in Vietnam. Luckily, we did not, and I'm happy we didn't. But there's who did. Even in the Korean War, there were a bunch of people who wanted us to nuke China, right? That was all a thing. A lot of people wanted to go nuclear. I'm glad we didn't. Does Putin go nuclear now?
There's a few ways I can answer this question. At first, I'll answer it through this. There is no people on Earth, besides maybe the Japanese, but I wouldn't even go that far, that understand when it comes to like people still alive today, because there are some still alive from Nagasaki, but I would say that Ukraine, when it comes to the legacy of Chernobyl, they understand the disaster that can come with nuclear, period. Even though nuclear energy has improved in its safety precautions by like tenfold since Chernobyl, and I'm a huge advocate for it. I went to the Zaporozhye nuclear power.
As am I.
I went to the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant recently, on the other side of the Dnieper, since it was occupied. When I was over there, I saw like the Russians targeting civilians. I saw a lot of terrible, terrible stuff, and one of the things that I saw, which was terrible, is I met the locals. We were looking across the Dnieper and we're eating pickles and drinking vodka at 9 a.m. because that's how you have to talk to people. You got to go to their level, even if that's not my normal morning snack. And I was talking to them, and eventually, when they got loose enough, they started talking about their lives, and they're saying that the bombing gets so heavy that the only way I can sleep is if I down like a whole bottle of vodka at night, because it's the only way I can sleep with my child in my arms as they're doing that. And 5 minutes after they said that's the reality they're living with, next to a plant which I had saw bombs go off a mile from this plant, like it looked like a volcanic explosion. 5 minutes later, they started saying like patriotic slogans to make sure that it caught that on camera, to make sure where they knew where their loyalties were and which side they supported. if those people sitting right next to what could be a second Chernobyl if everything went to the worst are willing to say, like, we push on till victory, then it's hard for me to make that determination for the Ukrainians of like, well, I think I know what dangers you should be willing to risk it all for your freedom. It's hard for me to say that, not to mention the fact that China has been very clear to Russia that they need to clean up their act on the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. No other country on the planet would want this to be normalized, the use of nuclear weapons in warfare. And if there's anything Russia could do that would have to permanently make China, for long-term strategic reasons and norms on the international community, turn against it on this war, really turn against it, it would be something like this. Not to mention, if they were trying to use it,
you think there's not a real chance of this?
I think the chance is very slim, because I don't even think they could necessarily use it strategically to too much benefit. And when I say that really impacts people. What do you mean? The thing is, if you use a nuclear weapon in strategic purposes, the idea is you want to blow such a big hole in their line through just obliterating everything there, and then you fill up that hole with your troops and you're able to make a breakthrough. That only works if you have enough soldiers. It's with the breakthrough.
No. I wouldn't see him doing that. What I would see him doing is dropping one or two of them, maybe even three of them, on transportation lines in Western Ukraine. And he's not going to move any troops there. He's going to sacrifice Western Ukraine, so there's no real way of bringing people in, so that he can just basically take over the eastern
That feels even more unlikely, because the radiation fallout would affect states like Hungary, which it relies on the support of when it comes to certain sanctions on its economy, which you're not going to see Hungarian population very friendly to Putin if their grandparents are getting cancer in northern Hungary. The Polish government, which is already hard line, the Czechs, there's a ton of people who would. So
I'm happy to hear this. That this is something that worries me. I hope you're right. This is one of the things that worries me. Right, once you get, it goes back to my earlier piece. Desperate people do desperate things, and if he's desperate, that is my worry, that out of desperation he'll do something like that. I would also like to say, I don't want any of this to happen.
When it comes to Russian missile control structure, it's not like Putin presses a button and then the nukes fly. I think a lot of people have this kind of view in their head from old video games or movies, because they've seen people on the nuke tearing out the wires after the button gets pressed.
Yeah.
But what happens is he would press the button, and then the message to launch would go to other people, which would then go to other people, to two people with the keys, and if anybody along that pattern says, "No, what? My kids are alive and I'd like them to not be dead," it doesn't happen. This has actually happened a few times where there was one person who stood up, and this actually happened in Russia, the Soviet Union specifically, and said, "No, let's wait for this to pass and let's see if anything changes."
But that's ICBMs. That's not artillery level. There's artillery level tactical nukes that it just takes the captain to say yes.
So you think that they would use a artillery level tactical nuke, which would
I don't think that. That's my worry. My worry is you could use tactical nukes at the artillery level that does not require Putin to turn any button at all. He just goes, "Yes, you were authorized," and they do it. So that is my worry. Local commanders who get authorized by Putin to go any means necessary. I don't care what it takes. I'm not losing Donbass. Whatever it takes. I'm not losing Crimea. Now, I could be totally wrong in this. I'm happy what you're saying. You've actually made me feel better. To be forward, you made me feel better.
Okay.
Because I am concerned. Once this goes nuclear, if someone's desperate or something desperate, it's terrible. And what happens when it goes nuclear and there are American troops there? What happens if American troops or advisors go there like did in Vietnam? And then all of a sudden now that happens. My worry is this could be a massive quagmire that with no real good end. And they could keep throwing a bunch of money and then eventually troops into it. Good money after bad. More blood and treasure into a thing that might end up being Russia anyway. That is my worry, right? If we go through all this, I mean, we spent 20 years in Afghanistan replacing the Taliban with a more powerful Taliban. This is my worry. Our past haven't been good at this.
Can I give you?
We've not been good at this.
The thing is, I would say the main difference between Afghanistan and Ukraine comes to public support. If you look at Afghanistan, the public support of the ANA was unbelievably low. I mean, most people from the polling that I've seen that they supported it over the Taliban, but it was kind of like a tepid support of they're worse, but which didn't really garner the most powerful soldiers, the most dedicated soldiers, and the government collapsed before we even left the country. This was a situation where we expected that. We expected the Ashraf Ghani leaving the country with suitcases full of money. And that opportunity was even given to Zelensky, and he rejected it. And the Ukrainian people rejected it to the point where they were making Molotov cocktails in their homes. And I've talked to these people who made the Molotov cocktails. Like, no, we're gonna fight until we win. Even if the whole world drops us, we'll just keep fighting. Like, even if it has to be a guerrilla war, we're doing IRA style tactics, right? And so for me, like, I guess that's the main difference. I was originally scared of an Afghanistan situation, but I don't really have that fear anymore, because I think that's the vital difference maker in that war and this war. And I mean, is it true that, like, is it possible that the struggle could all the way go through and it might have become Russia anyway? I mean, that's the risk with any independence struggle. That was a risk in Algeria for the Algerian independence fighters. Yep. That was a risk for us. It was a risk for the Vietnamese. There was a risk for everyone. It was a risk for the Irish. But ultimately, I think that they're doing well considering what everybody expected of them. I think recent news updates are positive, and I think if Putin's between a rock and a hard place, I don't think his escape mechanism being a nuke is going to be something he would necessarily even do, because I don't think the man's insane, even if I think he's an autocrat and a terrible person. And I don't think the people around him are insane enough to give that type of an order. And even if they did, I think the repercussions from the international community would be so overwhelming, because they would have to say, like, we cannot establish this as a norm, because then China and America and everybody else can use these weapons in, like, strategic low-level warfare. Do you really think that, like, America wouldn't want to be like, well, we got to now show that we're willing to do this, because if they're willing to do it, we have to show that we are, because we don't want them to think that they can nuke us, but we won't nuke them.
You are reading my mind why I'm worried. Yes, all of these things.
The thing is,
everything you said, if this war ends, if this war ends in like 3 or 4 months, if it ends in like 3 or 4 months, in any way, like, and both sides are somehow satisfied. Like, say, for example, they just lose Crimea and the Ukrainians say, fine, we'll deal with it, we don't want to fight anymore. I'm making this up, I have no idea. But let's say that happens. I'll shut my mouth and we'll move on. We were on the right side of it, life is good. My worry is, now it's next year and the year after, and people are still dying. And eventually, to your point, eventually Americans get sick of it. Eventually we don't care anymore. Eventually it becomes Afghanistan, the forgotten war. It becomes that. Or Syria, the forgotten war. It becomes that in America. And once that happens, Ukrainians are screwed too. And we spent money and time and energy, and it all goes for naught. We have not been good at this, Dylan, is all I'm telling you. We have not been good at this. We have not gone in and made things better. It has not been our history.
I would say that we aren't the ones that have to rebuild a country. This isn't Iraq. This isn't Afghanistan, where we overthrow a government and we have to reinstall. This isn't even Germany, which I would say was one of the most clear examples of the West's rebuilding efforts being successful, right? Where Nazism is banned, even we took former Nazi officials, put them into government positions, and still Nazism never came back up as a hard string in West. And the East Germans did this too. They did it with the military. They had some of Hitler's generals. And these are countries that we had to rebuild. Japan is another example, right? We don't even need to do that. They already have a system of government. They already have a fragile but functioning democracy. They have a popular leader, and they have a military which has shown itself to be competent. So I think a lot of the risks you're talking about aren't there. And I also think the Ukrainians are much better at communicating their message than the Afghans were. That isn't to say that isn't to say that the Afghan, because there's a ton of Afghan activists I know who are angry every day about the amount of suffering that's still going on in that country, but the Ukrainian government is just 10 times better at PR than any government I've ever seen in such a short period of time, that I think that that's part of the reason why. I think the last poll I saw was 53% of Americans are still in favor of sending aid to Ukraine until every Russian soldier's out of it. Only 18% was opposed to it. And that's after Iraq and Afghanistan. That's after 2 wars that were very hard, bloody, and many would make the statement that it was disastrous. But Ukrainians have really, sold this to the world, because their moral is also, their struggle, I think, is also easy to sympathize with. It's very easy to sympathize with. They didn't invade Russia.
I agree completely. They were invaded by Putin, no question. I hope you're right. I hope a year from now we're not having this conversation. I hope a year from now you can be like, see, Larry? See? I honestly hope that. I hope that happens. My worry is going to be here a year from now, you're going to be like, well, you see what happened was, and then that is my worry, because so far, since I've been around, and that I've been aware since Vietnam and longer, That's always been the outcome.
I mean,
I hope it's the exception.
You're a libertarian, Larry, and you're a very principled libertarian. But you do that even though knowing that most times if you fight a fight against a big establishment, you're probably going to lose. Like the odds are in this race, the odds are against you, like tremendously against you.
100%.
A million and one odds that you end up winning the governorship, but you're still running. You're still running, even though it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to, it's going to disappoint a lot of the people who probably put a lot of time and effort into your campaign. But you're doing it anyway because there's a principled position you hold because you acknowledge that the system that you're working in currently needs to be changed fundamentally if the things are going to improve. And for Ukrainians, they know that the history of Russian chauvinism, where the Russians, they banned their language, and the Tartar activists being executed and thrown into the rivers, and all of the corruption that they fostered, that state of affairs cannot be returned to unless there's a fundamental change, and that change must be the exit of Russian soldiers from Ukrainian territory.
I'm agreeing with you in everything you said, but if you use my example as one, which I think it's a valid point, I'm not mad at the Ukrainians for fighting a war that they may lose. I get it. I'm fighting a war that I'm probably going to lose. I'm with you on this. There are two things. One, I believe there's victory without me winning, right? If I make enough impact, I can still inspire change, which is number one. But two, I don't expect other parties to write me checks. I hope they will. I don't expect other people to support me. I hope they will. But I don't expect, in other words, if the Republicans go, you know what, we're going to give Larry $1 million, that would be awesome. Democrats,
you would accept it, wouldn't you?
That'd be great. I would happily accept it. Of course, Ukrainians should accept whoever's going to help them out. I would too. Now, I'd be transparent about it, but I would totally accept it if I thought it could be impactful. But I don't expect it. Right? I don't expect Republicans and Democrats to write those checks to me. As Ukrainians shouldn't expect the world to support them. Right? It shouldn't be an expectation. I don't know if it is or not, but that's my point. I'm not doubting their valor. I'm not doubting their cause at all. My worry is, are we actually helping or are we not? And in the long run, is it going to be good or is it going to be bad? And are we taking money that we could be using to support our own people to support them? Or would we just throw it away anyway, right? As a libertarian, part of me says we're going to throw it away anyway. So that's why I'm torn on that. If I honestly believed that we would take the $40 billion that we were going to give to them, or whatever the number is, and do something with it good in our own country, I might be more upset about this. But I don't know if we even would.
That's the
theoretically,
we both know that if this money was,
we should be caring about that.
Let's talk, like, if we're talking about the aid that's mostly going here, like it's mostly we're talking about military aid, and a lot of it's humanitarian, which I doubt you would generally be angry at humanitarian aid. I'm sure you'd maybe wanted to go in different structures, but you work with the system you got. But when it comes to military aid, it's not like we're going to turn this javelin into a bed for a homeless person. It's not like it's already, these weapons are already made. And quite honestly, they, by being sent to Ukraine, are probably being used to its most moral effectiveness than they could have been used in any other Raytheon-sponsored operation anywhere else in the globe. That it was possible, right? Like, would you rather see these in Saudi Arabia? Would you rather see these in LCCs?
No, I don't want to see any more Yemenis die. There's enough Yemenis dead. We're good. I'm totally with you. Yeah,
and so for me, it's like, we basically, like, even if you're a libertarian and you think that, like, the reason you're against intervention is 99% of the time it doesn't work, you've really found a situation here where there's a decent chance this is the one where it does, or this is the one where we could at least do it morally. And so, do I really want to be angry or not?
When you and I had our conversation about intervention, hold on. When you talk about intervention, I said, I'm happy we fought in World War II.
Yeah.
That to me was the 1 in 9 or 1 in 10, right? I wasn't against that. But I was saying since then, all of them we made things worse or not helped. I'm being forward with you. Yeah, that we argued about. But if we're here a year from now, and Ukraine has still survived and is some type of independent nation and has done it to has an outcome has been satisfactory for the Ukrainian people, whatever that outcome is. I'd be like, you were right, Dylan. I'm in. You were right. It was the right move. But if we're sitting here still fighting and the Russians are still fighting and our economy is still getting crushed, and if we go into recession next year, which people are talking about, if that actually happens, I'm not going to be happy. I'm like, you know what? Another wasted freaking war. We should have walked away, let them deal with their own issues, go into guerrilla warfare, and fix ourselves. That is what I'm going to be telling you next year, if that's where it is.
Okay. So I guess my question to you would be, does this look like a one of those moral wars that the United States or other international parties should involve itself in? Like, if you were president, would you have signed the aid over to Ukraine?
Wow. If I was president, would I have signed the aid over? Huh. You know, we're going back to hindsight, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't know what I knew now, to be fair, I probably would not have. Because I would have looked about what had happened in the past, assumed it was the same, and I probably would have said no.
You probably would have still offered Zelensky the right out and stuff like that, but you wouldn't have sent like military.
100%. And I probably also would have done something else. I would have tried a whole lot harder, and I might have still lost to get Putin to back down. So I probably would have done something like say, look, what if we pull out of NATO? What if we make a deal that Ukraine's not going to join NATO? Can we do something that you make an agreement on that you would not invade? Because then if he broke the agreement, that makes me rethink everything, right? So if I probably would have tried to create an agreement if I was president at the time to say, look, if we do X and Y and Z, you walk away, you don't go into Crimea or whatever, you don't go to whatever the case may be. We make a rule. I'd have done this earlier, right? If I knew earlier, I would have tried to broker an entire deal. If he then breaks the international deal, it does change my mind a bit because now I don't know if I have a good faith player, right? Can I trust him on anything else? I also that would have made me rethink.
Do you think Putin, like going up to the 2020 invasion, do you think you would consider Putin a good faith player on the issue of Ukraine?
Whether I would think so or not, I'd need something official in writing that I could point to and say, there it is. Because what I would then do is I would actually ask for authorization from the Congress. That's what I would have done. I would have asked for actual authorization from the Congress to support, and I would have said, here's the agreement he made. Here's the agreement that he broke. Here it is in writing, and you guys agreed to this agreement because you're Congress. He broke our agreement. I want an authorization to use of force to do X, Y, and Z. That I might have done, but I would have had to have that first.
Most people would probably point to the Budapest Memorandum when, Ukraine agreed to give up its nuclear weapons under the idea that people would respect its international borders. I remember that. Russia signed it. We signed it. And, when 2014 happened in the annexation of Crimea, the Russians denied they even invaded it. The little green men, they didn't admit to it until 2019 or something. I remember that. And we should have stepped in right then and there. If we were going to do it, then at that point, we'd have said, whoa. You signed it saying you're not going in. What's going on here? Right then and there. The one thing that I would never do, and you and I discussed this before, I would never unilaterally go in or support a war. If I'm going to support a war as president, I'm not obviously. You're going to get Congress to do it.
Congress is going to say yes because the people have to be behind this damn thing. And the people aren't behind it. And you're saying 56%, what did you say, of Americans are? Whatever that you said?
53 to 18.
There we go. So 53% of Americans are behind it and the Congress is behind it. All right, because you know what? If we get involved, we might have to send Americans. And so I want to make sure that you're okay. You're the parent of a kid who's got to go over there. You're voting for this. You're going to be responsible if something goes wrong. So if that happened, I would be okay with it. Well, I'd be more open to it. But if you're asking me with what I knew then, would I have said yes? I probably would not have.
With what you know now, would you say that would have been the wrong decision?
If I had made that decision, no. And then what was happening now, I probably would have tried to reboot my relationship with Russia completely. I would not have gone the sanction route at all. I would not have done that. I would try to reboot the entire thing if I
so heavily on that. I disagree with you so heavily on that.
I would have tried to reboot the entire thing if I could have. That's what I probably would have done. I would try to reboot the entire thing, shift everything, and try to get because I'd want to make a world to where we don't have to go to war. So I would try to reboot the entire thing. I might have failed, but I think that's what I probably would have done.
I assume that you know that peace isn't always an end in and of itself. Like some things like freedom and stuff like this matter more than that. And for Ukrainians, this would be the situation. For sanctions, these sanctions, of course, put a lot of pressure on the Russian economy. The Russian economy, people, I think, are downplaying.
Ours too.
I would say it's put a lot more pressure on the Russian economy. And I would say that's almost like a moral tax that people are accepting in Americans' favor, in fact. I mean, if you're in favor of still supporting Ukraine until the Russian troops leave, and the majority of Americans aren't compared to 18, then I think you're willing to say, yeah, I'll take on the negative benefit. They've even asked in pollsters, like, hey, would you continue to support Ukraine, even if it means higher cost of living? Majority of Americans still give a thumbs up to that. I think it was like 63%.
They say a thumbs up until they lose their job. They say a thumbs up till they can't buy the new car. They say a thumbs up until it affects them personally. Then all of a sudden that thumb goes down. And that goes back to my point. If it's still happening a year from now, and if we actually go into recession, people are talking about, that's going to turn around real fast. You're going to find Americans like, nope, I don't care about Ukraine at all. I don't have a job.
Fair enough. I'm very concerned that America's dedication to freedom, when it comes to like the idea of other nations and being what France was to us, might be lower. And that's something that's going to take a lot of ideological convincing that I'm on the team of. But when it comes to Ukraine and the sanctions, one last thing. The sanctions on Russia has worked in undermining a lot of their weapons production, particularly the production of high precision missiles, like these high advanced missiles that they used and they've been using less and less of. And that has undermined the Russian war effort. Why shouldn't we sanction the Russian economy when it comes to things like that and undermine them and the weapons production that they're using to go kill Ukrainians? Why should American markets help Russian markets kill more Ukrainians?
Because I think in the long run, you also wind up hurting us and Europeans too, which I think eventually is going to make people not want to fight the war. Right now, the Germans are having trouble with their energy. California's having trouble with its energy. France having trouble with energy right now. How long does that last, right? If they can find an answer quickly, I think it won't matter. If they can't, now the winter comes, now the spring comes, you're going to have a whole bunch of pissed off Europeans going, I don't care about Ukraine at all. And then we're going to leave them in the wind.
I guess my thing is they've hit their storage amounts of 80%. They've advanced it by like 2 months. They're 2 months ahead of schedule when it comes to like storage, and it's going to be a tough winter. But I guess like my proposal would be, so do we just wait till the next crisis when it's Moldova next time, which is not within NATO and could be, I mean, they're already technically occupying Moldovan territory in Transnistria. What would stop them from, say, it being Finland if Finland wasn't going to join NATO? Or like, shouldn't the Europeans make the decision now that they're willing to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to morals and repurpose their economy to be with countries that they're less likely to have a war with?
Well, let's assume that you're correct, right? And that eventually Russia is going to then attack, I guess, Moldova or Finland or whatever is the next thing. I hear this all the time. I hear this. We have to stop them now because someone's going to gobble up a bunch of countries. Yet no one's gobbling up countries. Countries are, if anything, becoming more and more independent left and right. Right?
I mean, we saw what they did in Chechnya, then we saw what they did in Georgia, then we saw what they did in Syria, and now we're seeing what they did in Ukraine. This is like the second time after Crimea and the Donbass.
Yeah, it's like second time in like 10 years. That's not gobbling up countries. That's 10 years and the countries are still not even gobbled up yet, right? They're not even gobbled up. Ukraine's not gobbled up. Ukraine, what you're telling me, Ukraine's still fighting back. Mm-hmm. So they'd have to first get rid of Ukraine, which to your point, they're not at the moment.
Yep.
And then if they somehow beat Ukraine and they're already getting their ass kicked, how are they going to take Moldova next? And then how are they going to take Finland next? Do they gobble up a country every 10 years? Is that the thing? I don't know.
Part of the reason they're getting their ass kicked is due to the sanctions.
Sure, but let's say we didn't sanction them, and let's say let's walk down that terrible road you want. We didn't sanction them. They attacked the Ukrainians, and they win. They actually, in 6 weeks, 6 months, whatever is the time period, they actually conquer the cities they wanted to conquer, and they ostensibly conquer the country, but there's obviously a guerrilla, army still fighting amongst the country. Now they have to occupy Ukraine. Let's say they did it. Will the Poles not care? Will the Germans not care? Will the Hungarians not care? If they wouldn't care, and I don't think that's true, but let's say that they don't care. They go, whatever, we don't care. Russia take over Ukraine. Why the hell should we? They're the ones who are going to invade a nest, not us. If the Finns don't care, I mean, again, I think they would care, but say they didn't. Clearly, if they had just taken, if we had made it, we did nothing, and they actually took over Ukraine, they'd have to occupy Ukraine with a guerrilla war that did not do well in Afghanistan last time they tried that game. Did not work for them. But maybe this time they can control, and they spend millions of dollars trying to control Ukraine. Great. Are they now ready to invade Poland next or Finland? And they're sort of trying to fight the people in Ukraine? And the Germans not care? The French have nuclear weapons too. So do the British. I don't know why we think that this would all of a sudden go to the gobbling up countries. That piece I just don't buy. Do I think we should defend Ukraine? I think theoretically we should. But do I believe we're going to gobble up countries? That's not a thing. That hasn't been a thing since World War II. And it's not a thing now. Conquering countries is expensive, really expensive. IP is way cheaper. Ask the Chinese. IP is way cheaper than conquering countries. So I don't think this gobbling up countries is a thing. I don't buy it.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on. If you wanted to plug your stuff, now would be the time to do so.
I love that you were able to chat, and anyone watching, please check out Larry Sharpe on all the things. I'm very responsive. I'm happy to have conversations. I'm trying my best, I hope you see, to give you actual answers, not dodge questions. Whether you like them or not, I hope you understand that I am being forward and you get what I actually feel. I hope you see that my intent is good. If you disagree with my outcome, my way of doing things. I am very open, LarrySharpe.com, and all the things from TikTok to YouTube to Facebook to Twitter to Discord. Larry Sharpe.
Thank you so much, Larry. I hope you have a good weekend and good luck in the race, man.
Thank you, my friend. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.